A wounded warrior walks through a forest during a heavy thunderstorm with lightning cutting across the dark sky. The warrior spits blood and murmurs the number 64 with great difficulty. Suddenly, someone starts clapping in an ironic way amidst all that heavy rain. The injured man turns around and notices a group of assassins who have just surrounded him. The leader of the enemies ironically praises Wu Qiang, Rin's resilience for still being alive. Qiang, Rin just breathes with extreme difficulty, feeling the heavy weight of his severe injuries. The leader of the enemy group takes a step forward with total arrogance and contempt. He laughs and asks if anyone who masters the famous soul-destroying sword could ever survive like this. Even without one arm and full of arrows, the warrior replies that his rival knows nothing. The villain points a finger, claiming that it is just a bluff and that he is going to die anyway. At that moment, the henches charge forward all at once, leaping to deliver the final blow. The bloody blade of the sword gets ready for a counterattack under the heavy rain. With a single fast movement of his sword, he cuts the opponents in half in midair. While the bodies fall into the mud, he updates his casualty count to 67. Qiang, Rin notes that with this move, they have already eliminated half of the rival faction's elite. The leader smiles in a gruesome way, saying that this loss is just the cost of eliminating the greatest prodigy. The man floats slightly, preparing to enter the combat in person. He lands softly on the wet ground, demonstrating flawless technique. Both sides stare at each other from a distance, while the storm continues to batter the forest. The wounded warrior positions himself firmly in front of that huge threat. The rival taunts him, claiming that the hero no longer has the strength to use his supreme techniques. Tired of talking, the protagonist tells everyone to attack at once, since he is already tired of swinging his weapon. The enemy leader becomes completely infuriated upon hearing Qiang, Rin's mockery. Without hesitating any longer, he leaps forward with everything he has, screaming that he will end this once and for all. The two collide in a frantic clash with fast strikes crossing the air. The villain smiles, convinced that his opponent is just pretending to be strong before dying. In the next second, the leader is surprised by a deep cut that splits his face. The violent attack rips the enemy's flesh, causing a lot of blood to gush out in the rain. The protagonist calmly asks about the sword technique the other one mentioned. He coldly asks if the rival truly knows the true meaning of that special power. The leader's lifeless body falls to the wet ground, raising the death toll to 68. Qiang, Rin starts walking aimlessly, dragging his legs and leaving a trail of blood. The warrior presses the wound on his waist, trying to stop the bleeding that will not quit. With his strength depleted, he collapses to his knees on the ground, spitting up a lot of blood. He realizes that facing 120 elite enemies was a much too great effort. The warrior mentally apologizes to Yang, mate, for failing to keep his promise to return. His gaze becomes sad and distant as he accepts that his end is approaching fast. Lying on the grass, he holds tightly onto a sacred scroll with the last bit of strength he has left. His biggest regret is dying without managing to pass his legacy on to a worthy successor. Alone in the clearing, the warrior lies there stretched out while blood trickles across the lawn. Nearby, a small purple flower sways gently with the evening breeze. The warrior barely opens his eyes upon realizing that someone is holding that plant right next to him. A humble young boy appears before him, offering the purple flower with a curious and calm look. Qiang, Rin gives a slight ironic smile and asks what on earth that little plant could be. He advises the boy never to eat that plant because, despite easing pain, it is a deadly poison. The boy gets scared by the warning and stares at the injured man, not knowing what to do. The wind blows hard, scattering green leaves across the silent forest. The boy starts digging a hole in the dirt using a branch while the warrior watches, leaning against a tree. To everyone's surprise, the warrior himself puts the poisonous plant in his mouth and starts chewing. The boy stops what he was doing and looks back, completely shocked by the scene. With the herb in his mouth, the man asks what the boy's name is. The boy looks at him with a serious expression and replies that his name is Eo Ja-seo. The warrior says that judging by the boy's coldness, he has probably lost his parents before. Ja-seo just keeps digging, silently tapping the piece of wood into the earth. The man tells the boy to stop digging and offers his manual, saying that he can understand the content. He tells the boy to use that to make his name recognized all over the world. The young man refuses the book immediately and asks for a little food if the man has anything. He argues that even if he becomes a legendary master, he will end up dying worn out anyway. Upon hearing that truth, the warrior starts laughing out loud, finding his sincerity amusing. He agrees that a master who exposes himself too much always ends up dying in that tragic way. Ja-seo stares at him in silence, not quite understanding the reaction of that dying stranger. The warrior realizes that the boy is right and decides to change his approach with him. With a tired look, he calls Ja-seo closer, completely changing the subject. The boy approaches and serves as support, so the warrior can take a few steps. While walking, the wounded man takes a closer look at the young helper's physical build. He thinks to himself that despite being thin, the boy possesses a prodigy's bone structure. The man also notices that Ja-seo's eyes convey out of the ordinary intelligence. At that, he suggests that the boy learn his technique just to be a low-level warrior. The master suggests that he be so mediocre that no one in the world would ever suspect his true strength. Seo confesses that the man reminds him of his father who abandoned him, and that is why he is helping. He adds that his father probably died dumped in some corner, just like the warrior. The warrior extends his bruised hand and affectionately asks the boy to come closer. He hugs Ja-seo tightly, revealing that the boy reminds him of the daughter he left behind. The young man stands paralyzed with wide-open eyes, surprised by that unexpected, affectionate gesture. Feeling the warmth of that moment, the master laments that Ja-seo is not actually his own son. That sincere gesture makes Ja-seo feel the protection of a fatherly hug for the first time. However, the warrior's HUD starts losing strength as his life fades away. The man's body slowly collapses without strength, revealing that he has finally taken his last breath. Ja-seo stands holding the manual while remembering the advice to be an ordinary martial artist. That was how the stranger he met by chance departed from this world, leaving behind only that book. 15 years pass, and we see the young Ja-seo now grown up, practicing his sword movements. He delivers fast and precise strikes in the air, demonstrating that he spent years honing his technique. Despite practicing hard, the young man found most of the manual left by the master way too confusing. Because of that, he decided to simply ignore those parts and adapt the strikes to his own rhythm. Creating his own style, he performed fluid movements that match his body perfectly. For the internal energy part, he used techniques he heard from a third-rate drunken fighter. Only later did he discover that it was just a simple breathing technique for elderly people. With this amateur combination and a broken sword, he ended up fulfilling the deceased master's wish. The young man ended up becoming exactly what the master suggested, a very low-ranking warrior. Even so, he polished the basic techniques he could perform to the maximum with total mastery and focus. With a lot of effort, he mastered a quick draw technique that looked impressive on the outside. Proud of his creation, the young man named the style the 10-fold soul cultivating sword. When drawing the blade, he demonstrates a speed that contradicts his supposed lack of real talent. The movements were way too different to use the original name the master had introduced to him. But the biggest difference of all between the two techniques lay in the level of destruction caused. The strength of his improvised strike was actually frightening and much greater than he imagined. The young man then wonders if he should raise his arm higher to look like a true master swordsman. Tired from training, he starts walking, thinking only about getting a good, warm bowl of rice soup. Behind him, we see a gigantic tree that was perfectly cut in half by his casual strike. Firm steps echo on a luxurious red carpet, while an enigmatic question arises in the air. He reflects that an ordinary person will probably never find a true martial arts master in life. The young man walks with his head down while continuing his silent walk through the grand palace. These legendary masters are capable of moving entire nations and shaking the structures of the world itself. However, all those powerful warriors are lined up, bowing with respect to every step he takes. He walks slowly down the red carpet, feeling the great solemnity of that unique moment. They keep their heads down and hands together, demonstrating deep reverence toward the protagonist. As he advances down the majestic hallway, Ja-seo thinks about his true current situation. A side smile appears slightly on his face as he recalls who he really is. Deep down, he knows perfectly well that he is nothing more than a complete, an absolute novice in martial arts. With the annual civil wars, factions needed to recruit any beginner to fill their casualties. This chaotic situation turned out to be excellent for him, to be able to infiltrate the recruitment. The man responsible for registration looks at him carefully and directly asks what his name is. Ja-seo maintains a firm and serious posture so as not to raise any suspicion about his real intentions. Pretending to be a true martial artist was the only way he had to manage to survive there. He knew that this way he would get guaranteed food for the whole year without needing to beg on the streets. With total focus, the young man prepares to sign the official registration document. He picks up the brush and writes his own name on the paper with surprisingly nice handwriting. The recruiter is shocked to see that a low-level ordinary warrior can read and write so well. He even suspects that the young man might have come hidden from some famous and prestigious faction. What he doesn't imagine is that Ja-seo only knew how to write the letters of his name and nothing more, and also some fancy names of invented strikes that he decided to scribble on the form right then and there. The examiner adjusts his glasses, intrigued by the invented name of the sword technique he has never heard of. Ja-seo asks if there is a problem, but the recruiter quickly disguises it by saying everything is fine. Then, the employee directs him to head straight to the blue room numbered 19. On the inside, the young man celebrates a lot for having managed to secure free food for a long time. But on the outside, he just nods, maintaining his serious and mysterious warrior pose. That blue place represented the middle class, right between the useless novices and the true masters. For Ja-seo, that intermediate position was perfect to go unnoticed and live comfortably. His initial plan was just to eat plenty and then slip away quietly before the tournament started. He feels a delicious aroma coming from the kitchen and is surprised by the high quality of the meal there. He decides to settle in silently in the cafeteria so as not to draw the attention of the other warriors. However, he notices that two frowning men are already glaring at his arrival from afar. He notes by the aggressive look of the two that they would only bring trouble if he decided to interact. The attendant there gestures politely, inviting the young man to join the others at the table. Ja-seo swallows hard and tries to stay calm despite the tense atmosphere that formed in the cafeteria. A cup of clear drink is served on the table, starting a tense dialogue among those present. One of the warriors who is watching breaks the silence and directly asks the hero's name. Ja-seo calmly replies that his name is Eo Ja-seo, using his wisdom to demonstrate confidence. The plan is to speak as little as possible to hide his weakness and give no hints that he is a mere beginner. The other man places the cup on the table, thoughtful upon hearing that brief introduction from the protagonist. He introduces himself as Shim-jil and points to the big guy friend next to him, saying he is so Gu-chi. The young man takes a sip of his drink while studying the attitude of that curious duo at the table. With a suspicious look, the frowning man asks which faction Ja-seo belongs to. He invents that he is just a wanderer who trained squirrel techniques inherited from his family. The big guy takes his drink and proudly reveals that they originate from the Chang'an region. Ja-seo astutely associates the place with the famous Jongnam sect to pretend he possesses great knowledge. The duo is surprised and flattered by the spot on guess, confirming the protagonist's suspicion. Seeing that the tactic worked, he decides to mention a famous warrior to win their trust once and for all. He invents an exciting story about seeing a great hero defeat a skeleton demon. With exaggerated gestures, he praises the impressive strength of their sect, faking total admiration. Shim Jil is radiant upon learning that the young man witnessed the great victory of one of his own sect's heroes. He even offers to buy more drinks so the hero can keep telling that exciting story. With that, the three start laughing and drinking together at the table as if they were long-time best friends. Ja-seo smiles upon realizing that winning people's sympathy is incredibly easy with a little conversation. Soon after, the sunny day dawns, highlighting the beautiful temples of the Great Ten Dragons Fortress. The protagonist walks calmly through the main courtyard, feeling quite refreshed and confident. Observing the place, he notices the monumental scale of all that martial arts empire around him. That structure was erected by one of the richest families, and its grandeur rivals the largest sects. He notes the great effort in the construction of the combat arenas that will serve for the awaited tournament. The young man celebrates, knowing that now he will be able to eat and rest for a whole month without any worries. However, he sees several talented and imposing warriors crossing the complex's hallways. Despite finding it a bit annoying to see so many strong rivals arriving, he decides that is none of his business. He continues his path with a confident smile, planning only to enjoy the perks of the place. The protagonist happily hums, thinking only of the warm meat soup he wants for lunch today. A gentle breeze blows, swaying the tree leaves under the lovely blue sky of that pleasant morning. Suddenly, a sweet and extremely pleasant aroma catches the young man's attention, and he stops walking. Before him appears a young, red-haired woman asking why he broke into her residential area. Ja-seo panics on the inside upon noting the terrible mistake of having accidentally entered a strictly forbidden zone. He apologizes politely, explaining that he was distracted and tries to withdraw as gracefully as possible. The red-haired young woman watches him suspiciously, carefully analyzing the intruder's posture. However, she suddenly smiles and asks him to wait a bit before leaving, asking his name. The young man enters total panic, foreseeing that this random interaction could ruin his disguise there. He thinks that according to his life experience, he must avoid getting involved with that girl at all costs. Suddenly, she appears right behind his back, asking excitedly if he is a powerful master of the fortress. Ja-seo timidly confirms, and she starts clapping, extremely enthusiastic about his reply. The protagonist asks the reason for that reaction, while planning to take steps backward and run away from there soon. That's when she drops the bombshell, directly asking him to fight a duel with her right at that exact moment. He is completely in shock, unable to believe the combat proposal he has just received. With no choice, he ends up assuming a defensive posture to protect himself from any sudden attack. The girl loves his reaction, praising the fact that he didn't cowardly run away like the others do. Desperate, he tries to explain that this is a misunderstanding and she shouldn't act that way. She goes on the attack without listening, and Seo prepares, knowing he cannot take the first blow lightly. The young man is startled to notice that the girl's delicate hands are glowing with a powerful internal energy. She delivers a devastating palm strike directly against the protagonist's chest in the courtyard. The young man grinds his teeth, putting in an immense amount of force to resist the impact and not pass out right away. The force of the attack drags him backward a long distance, leaving black marks on the stone floor. Even feeling sharp pain in his chest, he forces a confident smile so as not to show weakness. He inwardly laments having consumed almost all his cultivated energy just to endure that single blow. The red-haired young woman steps back and stares at him with wide-open eyes of extreme surprise. She doesn't believe that her opponent is still standing after receiving her maximum power attack without moving. With that, she mistakenly concludes that the young man before her is actually a supreme master. Ja-seo slowly turns his back, trying to maintain his unshackable posture before that girl. His face, however, expresses deep annoyance with that whole absurd situation that just occurred. He thinks desperately that he needs to make up an excuse to get out of there before ending up dead. When trying to speak, the young man is interrupted by a sudden nosebleed that starts trickling down. The girl cheerfully celebrates, claiming that not even a master would fully resist her secret technique. Bleeding, Ja-seo ironically praises her strike just to calm the waters and try to walk away from there. She then extends her hand and offers a piece of clean cotton so he can stem the nosebleed. She proudly explains that everyone who received that palm strike of hers ended up with a bloody nose. The protagonist is horrified upon realizing that she is an extremely problematic and dangerous girl. She gets confused, wondering why a master would act that way, letting himself get hit by her strike. Suddenly, she notices the sword at Ja-seo's waist and excitedly deduces that he is actually a swordsman. The protagonist gestures, scared, trying to hide his bleeding mouth, while the girl gets excited. She says she is going to fetch her own sword so they can duel on equal terms using weapons. Ja-seo fakes calm and scratches his head, pretending to reflect deeply on the sword challenge. On the inside, he cries desperately, cursing himself for bumping right into the worst possible person in that place. He returns to the room and patiently starts cleaning his weapon, knowing that a true master does that. Polishing the sword well is a simple trick he uses to radiate an intimidating presence of a strong warrior. With a firm and calculated movement, he holds the hilt of his weapon, demonstrating plenty of technical precision. The blade glows dazzlingly, reflecting his look of feigned determination in that dark environment. His two roommates watch him fascinated, commenting that he looks like a formidable warrior. They praise the extreme care and reverence with which the protagonist takes care of his faithful steel companion. The hero smiles, remembering that in reality, that firmness came from 10 years of working hard, cleaning an inn. All that cleaning technique was perfected by cleaning swords of wanderers and clients who visited the place. He recalls the master's advice about becoming just a mediocre and discreet warrior in martial arts. Drawing a perfect circle in the air, he sheathers the blade with impressive smoothness and speed. Now that he has truly become a low-level mediocre warrior, he needs to focus on his survival. To manage to go unnoticed and safe, he must act the whole time as if he were a very strong fighter. The companions are amazed, saying that he and his weapons seem to be a single element in perfect harmony. Feigning modesty, Ja-seo thanks them, saying the sword has practically become an extension of his own body. Suddenly, sounds of clashing metal echo from the outside, catching the attention of everyone present there. The big guy runs into the room, warning that a nasty fight broke out between some wandering warriors. Shim-jil complains about the impatience of low-level novices who cannot even wait for the tournament to start. Gyu-chi comments that those involved are well-known fighters and suggests they take a look out of curiosity. Shim-jil says he has no interest in watching amateur fights, but Ja-seo stays quiet at the table. But the big guy insists, revealing that the fight is between the Poison Axe warrior and the clean sword warrior. Upon hearing these famous names, the two stand up quickly, deciding to go see the combat up close too. In the courtyard, a crowd has already gathered to watch the tense confrontation happening between the duo. Ja-seo hides among the people, carefully watching every movement of the opponents in the improvised arena. Gyu-chi comments in a low voice that the confrontation attracted a lot of people since the two warriors have a good reputation around there. He points, indicating that the strong man wearing an eye patch is the famous wielder of the dreaded poisoned axes. The one-eyed warrior growls with fury, demonstrating a frightening raw physical strength before his adversary. The other opponent with a more elegant look is the clean swordsman who attacks, leaping with extreme lightness. His strikes are extremely fast and agile, making the blade dance with precision against the heavy axe. The brute axe parries the attack with violence, creating sparks that leap with the strong impact of the metals. The axe's strength is overwhelming, and its weight resembles the crushing impact of a huge iron club in battle. The audience watches in absolute silence, thrilling at the intensity and brutality of each strike delivered. Curious, the big guy asks the protagonist's opinion on who will come out the winner of that dangerous clash. Shim-jil guesses that the swordsman has much more refined strikes and therefore should take the upper hand soon. The big guy agrees with his technical analysis, also believing in the agile swordsman's imminent victory. However, Seo disagrees and calmly states that the axe warrior is the one who has the advantage there. Shim fires back, arguing that the swordsman possesses internal energy clearly superior to his adversaries. With a slight smile on his face, Ja-seo suggests they just watch, because the outcome will happen in moments. Everyone crosses their arms and focuses back on the combat, anxious to see which guess was correct. Ja-seo knows that the difference in internal energy between novice fighters is way too small to make a real difference. The fight proceeds intensely with metals clashing with a bang in the middle of the temple's stone courtyard. In the end, the warrior with more physical stamina will win, and the swordsman is already starting to show heavy fatigue. Shim is impressed upon realizing that Ja-seo's analysis was perfectly correct about the combat. Curious, he asks how the hero managed to predict the result, and Ja-seo gestures, explaining his simple logic. Suddenly, the problematic red-haired girl reappears right in front of them, interrupting the conversation. The girl points at Ja-seo, gesturing and loudly calling him the hero of the double nosebleed. The protagonist enters despair upon recognizing yesterday's girl, who is now trying to humiliate him in front of everyone. He tries to maintain a totally deadpan facial expression and pretends not to hear the young woman's childish provocations. She approaches him with an inquiring look, asking if he isn't also interested in that combat. The girl murmurs that until today, no one who took her palm strike managed to walk away calmly. She adds that victims usually stay bedridden for days, and that he is an impressive exception. Excited, she claims that her eyes didn't fool her, and that he is indeed an incredibly powerful fighter. Ja-seo sighs in regret for having crossed paths with that persistent girl again after running away yesterday. He lets out a friendly laugh, falsely praising her palm technique to try to end the subject. The young man advises the girl to keep training hard and takes the opportunity to turn his back and slip away. Suddenly, the crowd lets out a scream upon seeing that the axe warrior finally landed a blow on the swordsman. The one-eyed man delivers a violent hammer blow, shouting furiously that the duel's result was decided right there. The swordsman blocks the attack at the limit, and the big guy comments shocked that the two might end up killing each other. Shim laments the extreme life or death situation while the companion asks if no one is going to stop them. The combat becomes even bloodier when one of the strikes rips the side of one opponent's body. He explains that only a true high-level master would be capable of interfering in such a lethal fight. Completely out of control, the two rivals shout that they are ready to die together in that temple courtyard. Ja-seo assumes an imposing posture and crosses his arms, harshly demanding that the others clear a path. However, the red-haired girl approaches with her sword, recalling his sudden disappearance yesterday. She says she wants to test his blade today, and at that moment, a mysterious enemy prepares to attack. The young man gets confused by the young woman's insistence, not realizing the real threat hiding right behind her. Treacherously, the assassin throws a sharp dagger toward the red-haired girl's back. Ja-seo widens his eyes upon spotting the hidden weapon tearing through the air at high speed against the distracted girl. Acting purely by instinct, he draws his sword in a fraction of a second with a flawless movement. He shouts for her to be careful while she thinks he is just starting the duel heroically. With extreme agility and precision, the young man parries the flying dagger with the metal of his own sword in the air. The impact makes his hand vibrate, revealing that the treacherous attack was loaded with strong internal energy. He shouts desperately for the young woman to get out of there quickly and realize the gravity of the criminal assassination attempt. Without letting up, the masked villain throws more deadly projectiles against the two in the middle of the courtyard. He executes an impressive evasive maneuver to contain the new attacks, cutting across the courtyard with fury. He notices that his balance was totally broken by the brute force imbued in the poisoned daggers. The metals collide violently, scattering sparks and smoke all over the fighters' improvised arena. The two original opponents stop the combat immediately upon noticing the sudden interference there. Ja-seo appears in the middle of the arena blocking the attacks while the red-haired girl falls to the side. The entire crowd watches paralyzed with startled faces before that absurd plot twist in the courtyard. His companions conclude that the protagonist entered the arena to break up the novice's mortal duel. Ja-seo gets wide-eyed with panic upon realizing the terrible misunderstanding he got himself into. The young man tries every way to maintain his firm posture before the crowd that now idolizes him. He stands positioned right in the middle of the two furious warriors who are armed and ready for the attack. Shim-jeol and the others exclaim incredulously that the young man actually meddled in the novice's mortal fight. The dagger falls to the stone while the mysterious hooded assassin retreats and hides his face. Suddenly, the weapons of the two opponents collide with full force against the protagonist's extended blade. Ja-seo feels pressure as the combined internal energy of the two warriors flows into him. With his body trembling a lot, the young man notices desperately that his physical strengths are about to run out. The one-eyed man shouts that he will use his last breath of internal energy to pulverize the opponent once and for all. Upon hearing this, Ja-seo enters total panic, mentally begging the big guy not to do that. The rival swordsman accepts the insane challenge, provoking the one-eyed man to pour out all the strength he has left there. The two let out a roaring battle cry, concentrating every drop of their strength for the final clash. Holding back the impact, Seo cries in despair, cursing his terrible bad luck from yesterday to today. An explosion of blue and white light erupts from the grand courtyard, sealing the destiny of that chaotic clash. The spectators scream in shock upon realizing that the young master is using the legendary sword energy. He manages to suppress the two fighters at once, releasing a powerful blast of bluish energy. The young man realizes in despair that the situation is actually not quite what the others are thinking. A strong explosion hurls the warriors away, while everyone around screams in fright. A hidden weapon fired from afar flies rapidly in the direction of a defenseless young woman. A hooded assassin attacks by surprise, throwing another shiny blade in the middle of the confusion. The red-haired girl stands paralyzed with fright upon seeing the blade coming straight in her direction. She widens her eyes in total panic, having no time to react to the approaching mortal attack. Suddenly, his sword appears to block the projectile, saving the young woman's life in the last second. The young man ends up passing out on the courtyard floor right after the extreme effort to stop that attack. Panting, the girl looks back and notices the weapon deeply embedded in the wooden column. The bald man becomes thoughtful upon noticing that the young man used legendary sword energy to defend her. He is intrigued, recalling how the young man managed to suppress the internal energy of two opponents. Everyone wonders what the true identity of the young man could be, who even managed to block hidden weapons. In the room, the companions admit they never imagined the young man was someone so incredibly strong. Still lying down, the protagonist starts sweating with worry, thinking if his abilities have been exposed. He laments mentally for having passed out and acted like a novice while the others approach. The young man stands up with his hand on his head, trying to make up a convincing excuse for his fainting. Gyu-chi becomes extremely emotional upon seeing that his brave companion finally woke up. He praises the young man's bravery for having jumped without hesitation to save the lives of those two fighters. The protagonist starts remembering how he ended up getting involved in the fight by trying to block the daggers. He realizes he got himself into a tremendous mess by acting on impulse and letting emotions speak louder. Gyu-chi whispers that the entire 10,000 Dragons Fortress is talking about his heroic deeds. The big guy reveals that the girl saved by the young man is none other than the fortress lord's lone daughter. The young man enters panic upon discovering that he saved such an important person he didn't even know before. Suddenly, the room door opens, catching the attention of everyone present in there at that moment. The girl enters all cheerful, calling the young man a hero for having acted with so much courage in the courtyard. The young man just stares at her with boredom, wondering why that noisy girl came back there. Her father appears right behind and severely scolds her for speaking so rudely to her savior. She pouts, grumbling that she was just joking because she already considers him as if he were an older brother. The man officially introduces himself as Gun and deeply thanks them for having saved his daughter. Shocked to confirm the fortress lord's identity, the young man bows humbly, saying it was a coincidence coincidence. He realizes that having saved the leader's daughter is a golden opportunity sent directly by the heavens. The young man starts plotting in secret whether he should ask for a good cash reward or if that would be greed. With a mischievous smile, he concludes that the best option would be to win some valuable item to sell later. The fortress lord then directly asks what reward the young man wishes to receive and if he wants money. Striking a pose of pure nobility, the young man calmly replies that he didn't save the young woman for money. The fortress leader is surprised by the reply and asks if he would like to become an official martial artist. He refuses the offer, claiming his wanderer pride doesn't allow it, while he fears getting into new trouble. Gun thinks for a bit and offers a new proposal to make him an instructor to train new recruits. The young man humbly says he doesn't have the capacity to teach anyone, congratulating himself mentally for the fine speech. The fortress lord then suggests that the young man become his daughter's personal bodyguard, offering great pay. Chi cheerfully agrees, saying all the wanderers are proud because the warrior's rumor has already spread. The proud big guy even confesses with a thumbs up that he personally helped spread that rumor around. The protagonist enters absolute panic on the inside, cursing his companion for spreading the dangerous gossip. He knows very well that if this rumor spreads, several dangerous people will come after him and his life will be at risk. Therefore, he decides the best option is to just accept a valuable medicinal herb and leave from there as soon as possible. The young man apologizes to the fortress lord, explaining that he needs to follow his own path alone without accepting the post. Mokyugan accepts the refusal and directly asks what he wishes to win in return since he doesn't want the job. Feigning disinterest, the young man starts talking that he didn't do it expecting a reward, but leaves an opening in the air. He smiles sideways and starts humbly asking for a small medicinal herb as a reward. The fortress lord holds his daughter while repeatedly and surprisedly mentioning the medicinal herb. The leader questions if the young man desires the herb to boost his skills and improve his fighting style. Suddenly, everyone in the room turns around and stares at the protagonist with curious and attentive looks. The young man feels completely awkward, feeling the weight of all those looks fixed on him. He tries to fix the situation by explaining that he was referring to the two injured fighters in the courtyard. He fakes concern, saying it would be great to give the herbs to heal those warriors' wounds. The group is amazed by the young warrior's supposed kindness and generosity in helping his rivals. The young man continues his speech, arguing that the injured ones' allies will be grateful to the fortress lord. With a dramatic pose, he claims that this will make hiring even better warriors easier in the future. He finishes by passionately saying that the 10,000 Dragons Fortress will prosper much more with this attitude. On the inside, he cries in despair for having invented such a big lie that left him with no reward at all. The fortress lord puts his hand on his chest, totally convinced by the young man's wise words. He lets out a proud laugh and promises that he will send immediate treatment to the two injured fighters. The young man feels his soul empty upon realizing he lost the prize and is now stuck in dangerous rumors. The fortress lord says he cannot let a true martial artist leave empty-handed. He opens his arms smiling and promises to prepare a special gift that will not cause any disappointment. With an astute look, the leader warns that it would be a huge problem if the young man decided to refuse this offer. The young man forces a smile, internally begging to receive the prize soon and get out of there. The fortress leader says goodbye laughing out loud and saying he is immensely proud of the young man's actions. The fortress lord suddenly changes the subject and starts searching for something inside his garments. He pulls out a dagger wrapped in a cloth and asks the young man if he recognizes that mysterious object. The young man recognizes the item as the legendary flying guillotine, which is a hidden weapon of the dreaded Tang clan. The leader praises the young man's knowledge, confirming that this powerful hidden weapon is not easy to handle. He explains that when the blade is infused with energy, it burns with heat capable of piercing experts' aura. He adds that the Tang clan uses the weapon precisely because it requires a lot of internal energy from whoever wields it. However, the leader ponders that the Tang clan supports the fortress and would have no reason to try to ambush his own daughter. a penetrating look, the leader suggests that the true target of the surprise attack could have been the young man himself. The young man denies it immediately, saying he has no business with any faction and has always tried to avoid conflicts. He thinks, annoyed, that it would be extremely annoying if he ended up getting even more involved with rival factions. Feigning fatigue, the young man puts his hand on his head, making Gu Chi think his savior is dizzy and needs rest. The fortress lord agrees that it was a heavy subject for someone injured and proposes talking another time. The young woman smiles cheerfully, reminding the young man that the martial arts tournament starts tomorrow, and says goodbye to him. As soon as everyone leaves, the protagonist collapses exhausted onto the bed. Feeling the weight of that whole situation, he sits thoughtfully on the edge of the bed, carefully evaluating what his next step will be to escape from there. Suddenly, the young man widens his eyes upon realizing that the grand tournament will indeed start the very next day. The sunny day shines over the huge and majestic temple, marking the start of the great disputes. The young man grabs his sword, determined to run away, knowing that if he stays there, he will only find humiliation and danger. He laments losing the promised reward, but knows he needs to leave the fortress well before the fights begin. Firmly, the young man holds his weapon scabbard, ready to leave in silence before anyone notices his absence. Gu Chi wakes up yawning and praises the young man's diligence for already being up right at dawn, startling him. Trying to disguise the escape plan, the young man says the morning air is great and fakes excitement for the tournament. Shortly after, he walks to the courtyard bulletin board to take a look at the championship's official fight schedule. The warriors around start gossiping upon noticing the presence of the hero who defeated the novices the day before. He breathes a sigh of relief upon seeing that his fight is not scheduled for today and that he will have extra time to plot his escape. Suddenly, his heart skips a beat upon seeing his name on the board scheduled to face the feared faceless sword. The young man panics upon remembering that his opponent is that relentless warrior who fought even with an injured shoulder. The young man enters absolute panic upon confirming that he will have to face precisely that frightening warrior. The fighters comment anxiously about the fight, wondering if the injured rival will have the conditions to compete on equal terms. The young man clings to the hope that the opponent will withdraw from the competition due to the severe injury he suffered yesterday. A gong rings loudly, interrupting the young man's thoughts as he fears for his own life if the adversary insists on fighting. The announcer strikes the gong again to grab the attention of all participants for an extra and important notice. He shouts that everyone who participates in the tournament will win 2 silver coins, regardless of victory or defeat. The young man is surprised, calculating that this amount is enough to eat and drink well at an inn for up to 2 months. He soon decides to wait for the tournament, to start just to forfeit right then, and run away from there with the guaranteed money. Suddenly, the little head of the fortress leader's daughter pops up, sneakily from underneath the screen. Protagonist gets a tremendous fright upon noticing that the girl was standing right behind him. Watching his steps, she flashes a huge smile and cheerfully calls him by the nickname of Great Hero. The young man stands paralyzed and completely devoid of soul, feeling a terrible foreboding with that presence. He holds his head in despair, wondering why this ill-omened girl won't stop popping up in his path. The two start walking side by side through the courtyard while the young man tries to digest that awkward situation. Out of patience, the protagonist turns back and directly asks why she keeps following him. With an innocent look, the girl retorts, saying she is just moving forward along her own path. The young man speeds up his pace and firmly orders her to stop following him, but the young woman stays right behind him. She tilts her head and warns with a curious tone that he shouldn't head in that direction. He ignores her, faking mockery while thinking about how things always go wrong when she is around. Without paying attention, the young man ends up crashing hard against someone's back in the middle of the path. He stands static for a brief second with an expression of total shock on his face. Upon taking a step backward, the young man notes that he just bumped into a very tall woman with an imposing posture. The woman slowly turns around with an icy look and firmly asks what he wants there. The protagonist screams mentally in despair, confirming that this red-haired girl really does bring bad luck. He quickly bows in a sign of respect and apologizes, saying he was being chased by a ghost. The young man tries to correct the flimsy excuse, admitting that he just took the wrong path and committed a great rudeness. Upon raising his head, the protagonist focuses his eyes on the beautiful features of the mysterious woman before him. He is completely hypnotized upon realizing that she possesses stunning beauty worthy of a goddess. Manhwa appears laughing behind her and asks why he is staring so fixedly like a fool at her master. The young man immediately drops the look of admiration, going back to cursing his bad luck for finding the girl again. With a cold look, the beautiful warrior warns that this place is not a free environment where just anyone can enter. The playful girl laughs and adds that he won't be able to simply walk away from there as he pleases anymore. The protagonist stands motionless in silence while trying to understand if her teachings came from that same place. The master firmly holds her disciple, ordering her to behave and maintain her dignity. The woman introduces herself as Do-yan and says she already heard from the fortress lord that he saved Manhwa's life. The young man humbly replies that anyone would have done the same and tries to use the cue to leave from there. However, the warrior firmly grips the hilt of her sword, making it clear that not even her savior is free. NIDZO 43-5. She says the place's rules need to be followed while the young man begs her to let him pass just this once. Manhwa shouts, explaining that many men try to break into the area just to spy on her master's incredible beauty. She points to the group of men in the distance, claiming that if they let him leave, the other intruders will enter too. The young man notices that suddenly a small crowd has already formed around them to follow the unfolding events. The gossips comment on the dreaded Jade Eye sword technique and its origin in the Grand Emi sect. The protagonist feels his heart pound with nervousness upon hearing that renowned nickname of that master swordsman. He swallows hard, realizing that her absurd strength is visible just by pronouncing her legendary title. Realizing he has no way out, the young man decides his only alternative is to act much more firmly and boldly. With a heroic pose, he shouts loudly, claiming he has never in his life drawn his sword against a woman. He declares that his sword will stay sheathed even if she attacks him, winning the admiration of the entire audience. The warrior narrows her eyes and makes a face of complete disdain before that overly noble attitude. The spectators shout in support, agreeing that no one should ever point a weapon at such a beautiful woman. Ignoring the chatter, Master Do-yan starts drawing her blade in a slow and intimidating manner. Desperate on the inside, the young man shouts for everyone to hear that he has no hidden intentions against her. He swears up and down that he has no interest in her and will never step foot near that residence again. The young man raises his right hand, making a solemn promise before the entire public present to guarantee his exit. To prove his innocence, the young man dramatically shouts that he is even willing to cut off his own leg. Do-yan narrows her cold gaze and focuses her sharp blade exactly in the direction of the protagonist's leg. The young man panics upon noticing that she aimed for real and begs, saying he entered there by pure accident. He puts his hand on his chest, swearing on his own life that he has no romantic interest in the warrior. Satisfied with the young man's desperate oath, the beautiful master sheathes her sword back with a click. With her hair in the wind, she asks one last time if the young man really means what he says. She elegantly turns her back after deciding that the young man poses no real threat to her. The young man lets out a deep sigh of pure relief for having escaped such a dangerous life or death situation. She coldly comments that his honesty was great luck to avoid a violent confrontation there. Still trembling, the young man just listens to the warrior admit that his determination seemed quite genuine. Do-yan states that she will believe his oath for now and decides to overlook the intrusion into her territory. The protagonist dramatically cries on the inside, thinking he almost died for real because of such foolishness. She says she will respect the young man's wishes to leave, but stresses that she has her own principles. With a penetrating look, she warns that they will have to settle their pending matters and truly fight during the tournament. The young man stands paralyzed, watching the two women walk calmly back to their residence. He starts walking with his head down, daydreaming about a good hot bowl of meat soup and a comfortable bed. He sighs despondently, knowing those small comforts are worthless when his own life is in danger. The young man decides the best thing to do is just leave all this mess behind and run away from there in secret. In the distance, the spectators shout excitedly, thinking the hero is leaving so as not to cause trouble for his beloved. They praise him as a true master who understands woman's feelings, leaving the young man furious. He walks grumbling that this whole wave of bad luck in his life is exclusively the red-haired girl's fault. The young man reaches the fortress's main training courtyard, where several warriors are already training vigorously since early morning. He reflects worriedly that he ended up getting involved in too many troubles that could end up revealing his true identity. He plans to return to the isolation of the mountains and focus on his training as soon as this whole mess ends. Suddenly, he spots Shim-jil training hard in the middle of the courtyard during the early hours of the sunny morning. The young man notes that the saber movements are identical to the exhausting exercises he used to do in the past. Shim-jil plants his feet firmly on the packed dirt ground, putting full force into his rigorous combat posture. The young man immediately notices that the warrior's upper and lower body are totally out of sync. Upon noticing his presence, Shim-jil stops training and comments that he was looking for the young man everywhere. The young man lies, saying he was just aligning his internal energy and asks why he is being looked for. With a serious and slightly timid expression, the warrior reveals he has a very important favor to ask the young man. He takes a respectful deep breath and asks if the protagonist could give him some combat tips. The young man is surprised to see a proud warrior put his ego aside just to ask for training advice. The young man tries to brush it off, claiming to be just a beginner swordsman who doesn't understand much about using sabers. Insistent, the warrior begs for sincere guidance, claiming that a skilled master surely noticed something. He squeezes his own thigh in frustration, venting that he trains his muscle strength every day without seeing real progress. Downcast, he admits with sadness that he feels as if his combat skills are completely stuck. The young man in silence just watches him demonstrate so much disappointment and anguish with his own training performance. The young man asks if he ever tried to figure out why he gets so tired and panting after delivering saber strikes. He takes a step forward, pointing a finger, and states with total conviction that the real reason has nothing to do with fatigue. The protagonist guesses that Shim-jil learned everything by himself by reading a book of secret martial arts techniques. The warrior enters shock and asks, startled, how the young man was able to figure out that secret so easily. With a side smirk, the young man confirms his suspicion that he was just pretending to be an official disciple of the sect. Protagonist puts his hand on his chest and guarantees his companion that he will keep absolute secrecy about that discovery. Shim-jil feels extremely relieved with the promise of discretion and timidly thanks him for the understanding attitude. The young man explains that those who learn from illustration books usually lose the natural flow of combat movements. He advises the warrior to forget a bit about the rigid positioning of the feet and let the body move with the saber. Repeating the words of advice, the warrior closes his eyes, trying to mentally visualize this new concept. Suddenly, his eyes open with an intense glow upon fully understanding the essence of the valuable tip received. Enthusiastic, he assumes his combat pose, realizing he was focusing only on brute force instead of harmony. Shim-jil executes the saber strike, feeling energy flow much more smoothly through his body. A glowing trail is created in the air, sketching the perfect trajectory the warrior sought so much. Naturally, his legs follow the exact movement of the blade, maintaining the ideal balance in combat. A great impact of energy sweeps the courtyard, raising dust and proving the effectiveness of the new learning. With a huge smile on his face, he celebrates, saying he has never felt such harmony when using his weapon. Gyu Chai appears, pointing a finger and shouts, impressed upon noticing the drastic change in his friend's fighting style. The warrior cheerfully points at the protagonist, revealing he just received a valuable lesson from him. The big guy shouts enthusiastically, calling that help a divine and marvelous opportunity. The other students of the fortress stop their training and start whispering, intrigued by the revelation of that feat. They admit to being jealous and comment that they would love to receive advice from such a talented master. Chi begs for teachings too, while the young man gets furious because he is drawing so much attention for nothing. Out of patience, the young man starts walking away quickly while the friends shout, asking where he is going. In the main courtyard, the official tournament finally begins with the first noisy fights over the wooden arena. Shim-jil demonstrates combat skill under the watchful gaze of the protagonist, who watches everything from afar. The young man starts sweating cold, admitting to himself that he is way too tense to manage to keep calm. The fighters in the audience talk about the ranks and promotions they will receive if they win their respective fights. One of them explains that the higher-ranked warriors probably compete in a separate section of the arena. A mental chart details the strict hierarchy of the fortress, going from simple members all the way to supreme leaders. The judge raises a brown flag signaling the end of another fierce dispute in the martial arts tournament. The announcer declares the victory of Shim-jil, who cheerfully celebrates after defeating his opponent with ease. The warrior raises his saber under the warm applause of the public, while the young man watches proudly from the audience. The young man is relieved to notice that the audience is calm, because this way he will be able to forfeit without drawing attention. Chi congratulates the victorious companion, who modestly replies about his conquest in the fighting arena. The big guy insists that the victory was only possible thanks to the excellent advice the protagonist gave them. The young man just waves back with an awkward smile, congratulating his friend on his good performance in combat. He focuses, knowing that now it is his turn to step into the arena just to carry out his planned forfeit. He plans to leave the fortress right after, but is surprised by someone approaching from behind his back. The faceless sword warrior appears and makes a respectful bow, solemnly thanking the protagonist. The opponent reveals that he recovered quickly from his injuries thanks to the medicinal pill sent by the young man. The rival says he learned a lot by watching the young man's technique, and the young man just smiles, not knowing what to reply. With a firm look, the warrior claims he will do everything not to tarnish the honor of his generous savior in the arena. He shouts with passion, promising he will give his absolute best in the fight against the young man to honor the pill given. Then, he bows deeply before the protagonist, begging him to give him a good combat lesson. The young man is completely petrified and without reaction before so much determination coming from his opponent. The companions are amazed to see such a proud warrior bow his head to ask for a fight. Chi starts shouting and waving his arms, encouraging the crowd to chant the protagonist's name out loud. The young man trembles with anger upon realizing that his plan to forfeit in silence was completely ruined by his friend. With a dark and furious look, the young man faces the situation, knowing he will no longer have a way to escape combat. Chi winks and gives a proud thumbs up, thinking he is rendering great help to his hero friend. The protagonist screams mentally in fury, wondering if he should finish off that meddling companion once and for all. The warrior courteously gestures, inviting the young man to step up first on the stone steps leading to the arena. Resigned, the young man starts climbing the steps slowly, feeling the weight of each step toward the confrontation. With a serious look, he accepts that forfeiting is now impossible and that he will need to face the challenge head-on. He steps firmly onto the arena's wooden platform, preparing his mind for the inevitable direct battle that will come. The two opponents stand face to face in the center of the arena, amid the deafening cheers of the entire audience present. The young man analyzes the situation carefully, wondering if a direct and frank fight is really his only option there. With an agile and precise movement, the opponent draws his sword, displaying an extremely refined combat posture. He makes a formal bow, raising his shiny blade toward the skies to give official start to the duel. The young man recognizes that the rival's movement technique is worthy of a great master from the peak of martial arts. He concludes that to beat him on equal terms, he will need to anticipate and read every step of the adversary perfectly. The warrior positions himself, stating that he will start the attack first. He runs forward quickly and playfully asks the rival to take it easy. His fast steps echo across the wooden platform with speed. Eo Ja-seo feels the strong pressure and wonders if he will be able to predict the movement. He decides to focus on the sound of the steps and notices the attack is coming from the left. But he is surprised to see the opponent suddenly change direction. He notices the rival is on the right and sees that he manages to catch sight of his movement. The young man is shocked, not understanding how he can keep up with such a high speed. The adversary notices his gaze and wonders, startled if his movements were read, thinks this is impossible and that reading his steps shouldn't be so simple. The opponent notes that Ja-seo has his back turned and isn't even looking in his direction. This leaves him even more focused and determined to land his strike. The audience comments that the warrior is just circling the rival without finding openings. Some think the speed is so high that Ja-seo cannot keep up with anything. In truth, Ja-seo is just confused, trying to understand what is happening there. He thinks it's strange because the adversary's movements seem way too easy to see. Suddenly, he widens his eyes upon noticing something strange happening in the audience. In the middle of the crowd, he spots a hooded man who looks like an assassin. He fears the assassin is there to take revenge on him for failing earlier. While Ja-seo remains motionless, the opponent keeps running in circles behind him. The adversary convinces himself that the young man truly cannot keep up with his speed. He prepares to attack with everything, taking advantage of the rival being totally distracted. At the same time, the hidden assassin in the public pulls a weapon from under his clothing. Ja-seo panics upon becoming certain that he's the target of that dangerous assassin. The opponent makes a surprised expression upon seeing Ja-seo's sudden reaction. He abruptly slams the brakes on his feet on the wooden floor, changing his combat posture. He gets panting upon noticing that Ja-seo reacted instantly to his fast advance. He wonders if the young man can sense his presence, even without looking directly. Meanwhile, Ja-seo looks to the sides, worried about having lost the assassin from view. The adversary feels provoked by the young man's apparent calm and lack of attention. He charges again with fury, catching the attention of Ja-seo, who turns around quickly. The young man ignores the opponent upon finally spotting the assassin again in the middle of the crowd. The opponent runs, determined to win in speed, which is his greatest specialty. His feet glide swiftly across the platform, kicking up a light dust along the path. Ja-seo gets scared for having seen the rival's extremely furious face pass by his side. He stays static in the middle of the arena, while the adversary moves like a blur. The young man concentrates upon hearing the sound of a shot coming in his direction. He notices a red hidden weapon flying at high speed through the air. From afar, the assassin leaps to fire his weapon in the direction of the young man in the arena. Ja-seo prepares to draw his sword to defend himself from the mortal attack. The adversary enters total shock upon seeing the protagonist's unexpected reaction. He notices that Ja-seo abruptly changed his posture to the opposite direction. The young man executes an unbelievably fast sword draw to intercept the attack. To his surprise, he notices the hidden weapon is traveling slower than he expected. The red blade glows intensely as it approaches the hero in the courtyard. He knows he will have serious trouble if he fails to block the strike perfectly. With agility, he moves his blade in a fast arc to make the defense. The metals collide, generating a strong spark right before the young man's face. The clash of weapons releases intense energy with bright sparks. He endures the pressure, feeling that he has been through a similar situation recently. The adversary enters absolute despair upon noticing the powerful sword energy emanating from the young man. He is shocked, wondering why the protagonist would use such a dangerous technique in a friendly duel. Not wanting to be left behind, he shouts, determined to use all his maximum strength to counterattack. In the next second, the opponent is hit by an extremely violent punch directly in the face. The brutal blow hurls the warrior far away, while his sword flies through the air under the sunlight. He falls completely knocked out on the wooden platform, with his nose bleeding from the strong impact. The spectators watch that scene with expressions of total shock, unable to believe what happened. Ja-seo looks at the fainted rival, feeling extremely shocked by the result of that punch. The adversary's body remains stretched out in the center of the arena, raising smoke after the defeat. The protagonist just murmurs tiredly, trying to understand how things escalated so much. He pulls his arm back while trying to calm his nerves after that sudden effort in the duel. The young man notices that his sword keeps trembling a lot under the strong vibration of the accumulated energy. With a bleeding nose, he wonders confusedly if he actually managed to parry that powerful dagger. The arena's official judge points his arm and solemnly declares the young hero's great victory. His companions celebrate a lot, praising the crushing victory over the elite opponent. A spectator shouts, saying the hero accumulated his destructive energy but chose to spare the rival's life. The entire crowd starts applauding standing up, exalting the protagonist's noble and extraordinary character. The young man forces a wry smile, relieved for having survived despite the huge misunderstanding. The announcer strikes the bronze gong again to bring a new important notice to those present. He shouts that the hero will face the dangerous Poisoned Axe's warrior in the match scheduled for tomorrow, and reveals that right the next day, there will be a special duel against the dreaded Master Du, Yaon of the Ime sect. The man extends his arm, inviting the duel's winner to give a few words of victory to the public. But Ja-seo simply ignores the call and starts walking downcast away from there. The young man tosses some silver coins upward, cursing the tournament organization. He complains that they are trying to use him as a circus attraction to promote their championship. Suddenly, he stops in the middle of the hallway, realizing he has no time to waste on complaints. The young man knows he needs to pack his things and run away from that temple as fast as possible this time. He remembers the axe brute and the beautiful ice master who intend to face him soon. To make things worse, there is a mysterious assassin and his own noisy companions who are a danger. He is interrupted by a bizarre and frightening laugh echoing close by in the hallway. That sinister laughter gives chills down the young man's spine as he slowly turns around to check. He runs face to face into a sneaky-looking man known by the nickname Sewer Rat. The stranger provokes him, recalling that he humiliatingly defeated him in a duel 2 months ago. He calls the hero trash and asks if he has already forgotten having his fingers broken in the past. The villain approaches threateningly, saying he needs to correct the young man's bad habits. The goatee-wearing fellow starts drawing his weapon with calm and arrogant movements. It presses the sword's cold blade directly against the protagonist's shoulder to intimidate him. He promises to expose the young man's farce, claiming he used dirty tricks to win the last fight. Around them, people approach without understanding why that fellow would challenge the young hero. The startled spectators whisper, commenting that the goatee-wearing man has gone completely crazy. The fellow smiles sideways, guaranteeing he will tear off the protagonist's master mask right there. Ja-seo maintains a serious posture and firmly grips the hilt of his sword, preparing to act. He remembers that third-class opponent's combat abilities are quite weak. Even so, the protagonist took a bad beating from him 2 months ago without managing to land a single blow. He gets extremely annoyed, thinking about how he will take revenge on that man who broke his finger. The villain mocks the young man's facial features, certain that defeating him will bring enormous fame to his name. He warns with a sadistic look that this time the clash won't end with just a broken finger. The opponent spins his sword, making fast provocative movements, and tells the young man to prepare. Ja-seo remains motionless at a distance, calmly analyzing his old executioner's openings. The man gives a sarcastic smile, asking if the hero is paralyzed with so much fear before him. Suddenly, Ja-seo feels an extremely sharp pain coming directly from his dantian. He regrets having tried to block that special attack with so much force in recent days. The young man starts panting heavily, and his nose bleeds again due to the strain on his energy. The goatee adversary watches him confused, not understanding what kind of trick the young man is using. He taunts, saying the young man is just pretending to be tired to try to trick him somehow. But the protagonist's friends appear by surprise, shouting furiously against the villain's arrogance. The goatee-wearing fellow disdains, asking if the amateurs decided to protect each other. Yu Chi becomes completely infuriated upon hearing that he was called a mere beginner by the opponent. He roars with total fury, shouting that no one there has the right to look down on their abilities. The villain gets scared immediately upon noticing the intimidating presence of the furious big guy. He tries to fix the situation in a hurry, pointing out that he was talking only about the protagonist. Yu Chi shouts, saying he will not accept anyone offending his respected older brother. Without hesitating, the big guy delivers a devastating punch directly into the middle of the loudmouth's face. The villain is hurled far away while Ja-seo watches everything completely paralyzed in fright. The brute charges forward snorting with anger, promising to have a much more serious conversation with the enemy. While the guy gets beaten on the ground, Ja-seo realizes that whole mess turned out to be great for him. The other warriors take the opportunity to take out their own beginner frustrations on the villain. Back in the room, Ja-seo gathers his belongings, determined to leave that fortress immediately. He observes the old manual left by his deceased master with a quite nostalgic look. With a heavy heart, the young man murmurs thoughtfully, remembering the old warrior's words. He fondly recalls the moment when the master praised his incredible prodigy bone structure. The master lamented that if they had met a bit earlier, the story would have been quite different. The deceased warrior would smile, claiming the boy would certainly become the best in the entire world. Returning to reality, the protagonist shakes his head, finding that promise a big piece of nonsense. He grumbles that he almost died today, and that the idea of being the best in the world is nothing more than a joke. With everything neatly organized, he ties up his cloth backpack, ready to escape out the window. The young man takes one last look at the room, mentally thanking them for all the food and shelter there. The wind blows hard, scattering green leaves under the lovely starry sky of that calm night. Suddenly, the young man hears hurried steps and a familiar voice calling for him in the dark hallway. Loud knocking sounds echo on the door, and someone lets out a cry of pain from outside the room. The problematic red-haired girl opens the door crawling and smiles upon finding the young man. She tries to enter but ends up hitting her face on the wooden door again, letting out another groan of pain. A juicy piece of well-cooked, warm meat is lifted with chopsticks steaming on the plate. Sitting at the table, he eats while she explains that she brought food and drinks to celebrate his victory. All enthusiastic, the girl serves a full cup of alcoholic drink to celebrate the first round. The young man observes the large amount of drink, wondering if she isn't overdoing the dose. He plans to take just a quick sip to please her, and then slip away without leaving tracks. The young woman approaches with a strange smile on her face, asking what he thought of the drink's taste. Suddenly, Ja-seo's head starts spinning, and he collapses dizzy onto the room's wooden table. The protagonist widens his eyes in panic upon noticing the girl's sadistic look and evil smile. She laughs out loud, celebrating the immediate and infallible success of her secret drink plan. The young woman reveals with a mischievous smile that she put a powerful sleen he paid to make him pass out for good. She says he needs to rest plenty to have strength to face the poisoned axes tomorrow. Ja-seo wakes up with a start on the bed, feeling his heart race after that forced, heavy sleep. Upon noticing it is already pitch-black night, the young man enters total despair, knowing his escape plan fell apart. The roommate invites him to drink, asking why he is sweating so much right upon waking up. The young man is quite surprised upon looking at his own hands and noticing something unusual in his body. Upon closing his fist, he realizes all his internal energy has been completely restored and strengthened, but he soon remembers that he needs to run away from there before the new dangerous duels begin tomorrow. He peers out the window and spots the feared iron guards strictly patrolling the entire courtyard. He realizes escaping now would be difficult due to the guards and fears facing the opponent tomorrow. He pictures the terrible axe warrior slicing his body and fears not coming back whole. At night, the young man walks thoughtfully and apprehensively through the silent temple hallways. He maintains an expression of deep seriousness while plotting a new escape strategy. The young man observes the grand courtyard under the moonlight, trying to find a gap in security. He reaches the combat arena, determined to find some flaw in the structure to cancel the fight. While walking across the platform, he notices the old wood making strange noises with every step. He notices, surprised, that the dueling place is much more worn out than he imagined before. Crouched down, the young man finds a pointed rusty nail sticking out of one of the planks. A smile appears on his face upon realizing he can use that loose nail to his advantage in the duel. He calculates that with the dust and dirt of the arena, his adversary won't be able to see the danger on the floor. The rusty nail will stay perfectly hidden under the filth, waiting for the opponent's step. He plans to make the rival's step right on the sharp tip to neutralize his attacking movements. The young man soon gives up on the far-fetched idea, admitting that such a foolish plan would never work. Letting out a long sigh, he lies down on the platform, questioning what he is doing with his life. He seriously considers quitting martial arts to isolate himself in the mountains and become a farmer. The young man almost cries in frustration, lamenting having to constantly running away from extreme dangers. When leaning to get up, he ends up accidentally breaking a piece of the staircase's stone structure. The young man gets scared by the sudden collapse and almost falls backward from losing balance. When trying to catch himself, he presses his other hand and easily smashes another solid concrete block. He is perplexed upon seeing the damage, commenting that the temple stairs are in terrible condition. The young man brushes off his clothes, complaining that the maintenance of that grand fortress is a true disaster. Desperate, he shouts to the skies, not knowing what he will do to survive tomorrow's scheduled combat. Behind him, the stone stairs display deep cracks spreading in an impressive way. The impact of his casual hand completely destroyed the stone block, revealing his absurd strength. The day soon dawns with a lovely sun shining on the golden horizon of the 10,000 Dragons fortress. The protagonist wakes up groaning with fatigue, his body quite sweaty after a restless night of sleep. He opens his eyes slowly upon hearing his companion's call, as he tries to wake him up in a hurry. The big guy warns that the tournament is already halfway through, and that he needs to get up for his first fight. He scratches his head, revealing he had a terrible and frightening nightmare all through the previous night. In the dream, the terrible axe warrior was cutting his body into pieces several times without mercy. The young man laments having died so many times in his own mind, managing to survive only once. Upon placing his bare feet on the wooden floor, he feels a strange tingling of energy flow. The young man wonders if the red-haired girl put some secret ingredient in that sleeping aid. Upon leaving the room, the protagonist is greeted with plenty of warm applause by the spectators. The young man is startled by the immense amount of people who gathered to watch the grand tournament. He notices that the fortress organization keeps using his image to attract more and more fighters. While walking, he notices other warriors laughing and chatting excitedly about the new hires. Suddenly, the goatee-wearing fellow reappears all bandaged up with a look of pure hatred against the young man. The opponent's huge axe is slammed with violence into the stone floor, demonstrating his great brute strength. The brute greets the young man respectfully, thanking him for the medicinal pill he received earlier. Ja-seo just swallows hard and tries to maintain his unshackable posture before that frightening opponent. The giant smiles with determination, guaranteeing he will fight with all his might to honor the duel. The protagonist inwardly laments upon noting that none of those warriors know when to quit. With a side smile, the young man suggests they decide the clash's outcome in a simpler way. He proposes that the combat be settled with a single strike, just like what happened in his previous duel there. The young man dramatically claims that if he doesn't win with this single attack, he will accept his defeat immediately. The axe warrior accepts the bold challenge, finding the young hero's great self-confidence incredible. He closes his fist with full force, preparing his most destructive technique to answer the single attack. On the inside, the young man celebrates a lot upon realizing the big guy fell perfectly for his astute strategy. The fortress's grand banner sways under the fresh wind of that busy morning of duels. The gong rings loudly, announcing the official start of the life or death combat in the courtyard. The giant opponent fixes his focused and intimidating gaze directly on the protagonist in the arena. Ja-seo tries to contain his nervousness, maintaining his firm posture despite sweating cold with fear. With the axe in hand, the brute firmly demands that the young man draw his sword already. Faking calm, the young man replies that his sheathed blade is just as lethal as if it were already drawn. On the inside, he knows his only real alternative to survive is to use yesterday's same trick. The plan is to kick the loose dust off the wooden floor to momentarily blind the opponent's vision, and in the second following, sneak around to deliver a fast counterattack. Right behind his back, the brute charges like a true demolition tractor, destroying the platform's wooden floor. The young man takes a deep breath, concentrating every drop of his internal energy directly into his legs. All the energy cultivated by his simple, breathing technique starts concentrating in his body. The flow of power rushes down quickly to his feet, giving him an extra boost of speed there. The opponent approaches, delivering devastating strikes with his heavy weapons in the courtyard. Ja-seo stomps with full force on the wood, hoping to kick up a large, suffocating cloud of dust. The giant raises his weapon and lands a crushing blow that breaks part of the arena's floor. But the protagonist enters despair upon noticing that the floor is clean and without any dust at all there. He gets in total panic upon realizing today's conditions are completely different from yesterday's. Without wasting time, the giant smiles maliciously and pulls the heavy chain of his weapon hard. The axe flies at high speed, tearing through the air and almost hitting the young man's head in the arena. The fortress workers celebrate, saying they repaired and cleaned all the arena wood today. Ja-seo looks back angrily, realizing the culprit who ruined his plan was the goaty fellow. The fully bandaged villain laughs out loud, shouting that he reinforced the arena so they can fight without any worries. He mocks, claiming he already knows all the cheap tricks and frauds of the young protagonist there. He orders the giant to keep attacking to expose the young man's farce before the public once and for all. The brute spins the iron chains, creating a frightening buzz echoing all over the courtyard. The young man runs from side to side, trying in every way to dodge that rain of strikes. The axe warrior gets furious, asking why the opponent refuses to draw his sword to buy time. The protagonist praises his style while desperately considering surrendering. Suddenly, he feels another sharp pang of pain in his abdomen that makes him stop immediately. To his surprise, the pain passes quickly, and his feet start radiating an incredible feeling of freshness. He gets completely confused, wondering what mysterious remedy the red-haired girl gave him. He decides to use his fastest strike to force a friendly tie and save his skin from there soon. The big guy celebrates upon seeing the young man grab the weapon's hilt and prepares his most destructive attack. The iron chains dance through the air at high speed, creating a deadly whirlwind of sharp steel. He leaps with everything, unleashing a crushing blow capable of pulverizing the wooden arena platform. The spectators watch open-mouthed, confirming the overwhelming strength of the feared poisoned axes. They comment worriedly that not even the young prodigy will manage to find an opening in that defense. The strong wind generated by the giant's attack breaks part of the floor, lifting wood splinters into the air. The young man stays incredibly calm in the center of that true gale of strikes and dust. The opponent roars with total fury, bringing his axe down with maximum force to end the dispute once and for all. The protagonist plans to dodge sideways and fake a fast attack to end the duel safely. Upon planting his feet, he draws his sword at a speed that surpasses all his previous limits. A colossal explosion of energy and wind sweeps the entire courtyard, covering the fighters in seconds. A dense gray dust curtain completely covers the courtyard, hiding the outcome of the combat. The giant widens his eyes, unable to see the young man who disappeared in the middle of all that smoke. The audience coughs and tries to fan the air, curious to understand what on earth happened in the center of the arena. The goatee-wearing fellow protects his face, confused and quite tense with the result of that clash. In the silence of the smoke, the protagonist remains standing, extending his sword with enormous imposition. He widens his eyes, surprised to notice that he is still alive and that his strike was indeed devastating. The tip of Eo Ja-seo's sword lightly touches the opponent's pants without even piercing his skin. The giant gets confused upon looking down and seeing the young man fallen in the middle of the hole that opened in the wooden floor. The young man realizes, shocked, that the adversary used the attack's own impact to break the floor and neutralize his advance. The brute smiles victoriously for having stopped an attack with such ease, and with just a simple movement. The protagonist enters total panic upon realizing that the big guy simply destroyed the solid oak floor. He gets completely terrified to see that the opponent is a true monster capable of breaking solid wood. The giant convinces himself that the duel truly ended fast, just the way Eo Ja-seo had predicted before. He drops his heavy chains and weapons onto the wooden floor, decreeing the end of that intense dispute in the arena. The adversary makes a respectful bow, while the surrounding crowd shouts the protagonist's name without stopping. The young man stays trapped in the wood hole, not quite understanding how that bizarre situation took this turn. The entire audience celebrates with enthusiasm the supposed genius victory of the young man, who is still cornered on the floor. A bald warrior in the audience comments that only a true master could use the scenery itself to win. Another spectator claims the rumors about the young man being the successor of a secret clan must be totally real. The big guy extends his hand in a friendly way to help the startled protagonist out of the platform hole. The young man just accepts the gesture in silence while trying to maintain his untouchable master pose before everyone. On the inside, the young man prays desperately never to have to face that frightening opponent again. The damage left on the floor shows the absurd strength of the attack that even broke the stone right below the wood there. The deep cracks in the rock prove the destructive power of that combat that shocked everyone present. The fortress warriors keep celebrating Eo Ja-seo's name loudly for what they consider a historic victory. Some men start comparing the protagonist's talent to the level of the legendary 4 dragon generals. Eo Ja-seo gets annoyed with the absurd rumors the crowd is inventing about his strength at that moment. The men bet that soon the young man will receive a direct challenge from one of those extraordinary warriors. The protagonist enters despair, picturing those legendary warriors coming after him for a real combat. Far away in the inner courtyard, a warrior trains his sword movements with plenty of focus and determination. The bald fighter takes a deep breath while pushing himself to the max to hone his combat technique in the courtyard. He steps firmly on the packed dirt, seeking the ideal posture to deliver another fast sequence of strikes there. The blade cuts the air swiftly as he repeats the exhausting movements of his training under the hot sun. He takes a pause and thinks that young Ja-seo is truly incredible and is on a totally different level. The man laments knowing that someone ordinary like him would never manage to compare to the young man's natural talent there. The protagonist walks in a hurry, planning to slip away before new troubles appear in his path. Suddenly, the young man gets a huge fright upon hearing someone calling out for him loudly right behind where he was passing. The bald warrior approaches with his hands, joined in a traditional sign of deep respect for the young master. He begs sincerely for Gu-chi to teach him and evaluate his simple swordsmanship techniques for a moment. The protagonist feels totally awkward, seeing the man insist and call him brother in such a dramatic way. To try to escape the conversation, the young man quickly praises his training and says he needs to continue his path. The warrior enters total shock, thinking the master manages to read and understand his entire technique in just the blink of an eye. So Gu-chi tries to calm him down, saying he has nothing to comment because in truth he doesn't understand almost anything about swords. He adds that because of that, he would never be in a worthy position to judge another warrior's combat ability. The bald man stands paralyzed and speechless before that very humble and unexpected reply from the young prodigy. He reflects in silence on the painful possibility of his technique being so weak the master didn't even recognize it. The warrior questions with a trembling gaze if his movements were really invisible or unworthy of attention. He closes his fist tightly, thinking his own weapon maybe doesn't even deserve to be called a real sword from then on. The young man realizes the warrior got everything wrong again and ended up falling into a deep crisis of self-confidence. Even so Gu Chi nota that man's devotion to the art of the sword is indeed extremely sincere and true. Determined not to make the situation worse, the young man tries to turn around quickly to leave from there once and for all, but is blocked. The other warrior asks about the bundle of clothes he carries on his back, leaving the young man apprehensive about the suspicions. The protagonist smiles slightly and directly announces that he is leaving the fortress of the 10,000 deities at that moment. The young man before him is completely shocked by the sudden news that the duel's grand winner is simply leaving. He questions the reason for giving up a guaranteed promotion to team leader and a bright future inside the clan. So Gu Chi calmly replies that he never sought a place to settle down when he decided to come to that warrior fortress. The other warrior laments his departure, but the young man insists that the time has simply come to move forward. He watches the protagonist walk away in silence, unable to contain his deep admiration for that master. So Gu Chi fakes a poetic posture, saying he needs to continue his journey to understand the path of the sword. With firm and calm steps, he definitely says goodbye to that place where he caused so much commotion without meaning to. He makes a formal farewell bow, stating that destiny will reunite them again if that is the divine will. The bald warrior gets emotional, believing the young master's departure confirms the rumors about his secret training. The other companion promises to repay the young man's enormous generosity as soon as they have the chance to meet. On the inside, the protagonist proudly celebrates, thinking his farewell speech sounded extremely natural and heroic. The beautiful and calm dirt path, surrounded by dense forests, stretches before him under the clear sky of that morning. The young man walks calmly while planning his next destination after spending days eating and sleeping very well. He recognizes that he overdid the farce and decides the best now is to vanish into the mountains for good to avoid trouble. Suddenly, the sound of horse hooves catches his attention coming at high speed right behind him on the empty road. The young man turns around quickly, startled by the sudden approach of someone riding in such a hurried way. To his surprise, the horse stops abruptly, revealing the red-haired girl riding it. The girl complains angrily, asking how he could leave so suddenly and mess with her feelings that way. He questions what terrible sin he committed in a past life to have to endure that annoying girl chasing him. Without any shyness, the girl gets down a bit from the horse and firmly grips his hands with a very anxious expression. She gets emotional upon noticing the protagonist extended his hand to gently help her down from the mount. The young man asks, confused and quite annoyed, the real reason she is calling him brother in such an intimate way. With blushing cheeks, the girl confesses that he stirred her heart a lot, and that is why she decided to follow him on the road. Suddenly, the desperate shouts of her personal guard echo through the forest as he runs to catch up with them. So Gu Chi notices she sneaked out of the fortress and warns that the man looks truly worried about her disappearing. The guard arrives sliding and falls to his knees on the ground, completely exhausted from running so much after the rebellious girl. The man shouts in despair and asks with fury what would happen if some enemy decided to burn her quarters. The young man is speechless upon hearing the guard accuse the girl of trying to imitate the dramatic heroine of some famous romance. The girl makes a goofy face, totally busted for being caught acting out her silly fantasies before the young man. She flashes an awkward, sheepish smile, realizing her plans to look like a tragic character failed miserably. Later, they end up gathering at a simple tavern to eat, while the young man reflects on his complicated life. He enjoys the hearty meal at the table, but tries to keep his guard up before his unpredictable companions. The young man celebrates in silence upon looking at the bag of silver coins he managed to win so easily and quickly. Suddenly, the girl gets very close to his face with a mischievous smile, startling the young man in the middle of dinner. He deeply regrets not continuing his path alone, knowing that girl will bring more trouble. She laughs in a crazy way, resting her head on his shoulder while showing all her eccentric personality. The young man uses his finger to push her face back, ordering her to step away and respect his personal space at the table. He changes his tone of voice and seriously asks if she remembers that mysterious medicinal wine she gave him earlier. The young woman proudly confirms, saying she asked her older sister, who is the head of the medical hall, to prepare the remedy. With a penetrating and serious look, she tries to find out what the secret ingredients put into that formula were. The girl leans back thoughtfully, trying to remember the details, but doesn't seem very sure about what was actually in there. Annoyed by the mystery, the young man pushes her away again, suspecting she just wants to use him as an excuse to return to the fortress. She makes a funny pout with her cheek pressed by the young man's finger while faking being extremely offended by it. A huge bald brute starts causing a big commotion, shouting furiously at one of that inn's servants. He demands respect, pointing to the frightening details of his clothing and asking if the servant doesn't know who they are. The villain reveals he was already very angry for having been humiliatingly defeated earlier during his stint at the fortress fights. He grabs the poor boy's face violently, taking out all his frustration and accumulated anger on the young servant. The brute threatens to rip the boy's head off and hang it as decoration, startling the other customers of the place. Beside him, his other companion watches the whole violent scene with a sadistic smile while calmly drinking his tea. The other customers whisper in fright, recommending that no one face the group to avoid attracting those bandits' fury. Goo! Chai decides to ignore the fight, knowing very well that getting involved with that dangerous gang would be the end of his peace there. However, the red-haired girl by his sides starts getting visibly annoyed by the cowardice of that assault. The protagonist enters panic upon noticing that the crazy girl stood up and is about to do something huge and foolish at the inn. So Chi begs in his thoughts for the girl not to leave her spot and avoid drawing the bandits' attention there. He grips the hilt of his sword, prepared to act if the situation gets completely out of control in the tavern. The young woman shouts with fury, calling the brutes scum and demanding that they stop that cowardice immediately. The protagonist stands up slowly, feeling that his plan to have a peaceful meal has been ruined for good. The girl keeps provoking the criminals, demanding that they apologize immediately if they want to stay alive. She orders the bandits to get the hell out of there, leaving the whole environment in a tense and very dangerous silence. So Chi gets extremely annoyed upon seeing that the impulsive girl managed to pick a huge fight for nothing. The personal guard tries to restrain her, but she keeps telling the enemies to kneel and beg for forgiveness immediately. The other inn customers watch the scene shocked by the unusual courage of that mysterious young woman in red. Someone in the audience recognizes the girl, revealing she is the young mistress of the feared 10,000 deities fortress. Public starts whispering upon noticing that the legendary Eo Ja-seo is also right behind her following the confusion. The crowd concludes that Eo Ja-seo's group truly doesn't tolerate any kind of injustice against the weaker ones. One of the customers gets emotional, saying that heroic attitude is the true example of chivalry he admires. The second brute with a scar on his face disdains that situation, demonstrating he doesn't care about their fame. So Chi focuses his attention on the opponent's look, feeling he has seen those red garments somewhere before. He analyzes the criminals' red tunics, trying to remember where he knows that group of dangerous warriors from. The young man realizes with terror that those men belong to the feared clan of the terrible white-eyed demon there. He remembers that this faction committed terrible massacres against major martial arts sects recently. The reputation of this group of merciless assassins is marked by a trail of blood and destruction wherever they pass. The gang is led by a merciless monster known all over the continent as the wide-eyed red-robed demon. Angered by the girl's insult, the two assassins draw their swords and leap with fury to attack. The protagonist enters total panic, realizing the peaceful situation just turned into a mortal combat. The young woman's personal guard draws his blade quickly and charges to intercept the two opponents' mortal attack. So Chi watches the start of the clash tensely, fearing the battle might end up revealing he has no real strength. The protector clashes against the aggressors in the middle of the hall, trying to keep the girl and the protagonist well protected. The blades collide fiercely, generating sparks that illuminate the tavern's dark interior amid the sound of metal. The guard shows all his skill by enduring the absurd pressure of the strikes delivered by the cruel assassins. The young woman watches the combat with an annoyed expression for seeing her peace broken by those vulgar criminals. The protagonist is relieved to notice that the fortress guard is a true elite master capable of holding the fight. He plans to stall the adversaries and buy time while his strong ally solves the situation with his fast sword. The young man maintains a calm smile on his face in hopes that the enemies will get tired and decide to retreat from that combat. He observes that maintaining that frantic sequence of attacks consumes an absurd amount of internal energy. The young man praises the refined energy control of the personal guard who moves in a totally different way from someone ordinary. He confesses to himself that his own internal energy would barely last a single breath if he tried to do the same there. The two fighters keep exchanging fast strikes while the girl and Chi just watch the dispute from afar. The protector suddenly shouts in despair upon noticing that one of the bandits changed targets and charged toward the girl. The scarred assassin projects himself at high speed, delivering a treacherous sword strike against the red-haired girl. With total fury, he tries to finish off the young woman once and for all to avenge the humiliation he suffered earlier. The girl freezes with fear before the speed of the attack while panics right behind without knowing what to do. He knows that if the fortress mistress gets hurt, his own life will also be completely finished because of it. With no choice, the protagonist leaps toward the girl, looking for a way to prevent that imminent tragedy from happening. His plan is to deflect the mortal attack without directly injuring the aggressor, so as not to provoke the terrible criminal clan's wrath. In a fraction of a second, Chai draws his blade with a frightening agility that cuts through the dining hall's air. The sound of the collision echoes loudly as he manages to intercept the criminal's sword right before the startled young woman's face. The young man celebrates, thinking he saved her life with perfection and without needing to hurt the terrible faction member. But suddenly, he gets totally confused upon seeing several drops of blood fly through the air and stain his own clothes. The young man widens his eyes, horrified to notice that his defensive strike ended up causing much greater damage than planned. The aggressor falls to his knees on the ground, screaming in pain while holding his arm severely injured by the protagonist's blade. Taken by hatred, he roars that he will tear the young man apart and hang his remains to dry under the sun as revenge. The other criminals join the injured one, while the protagonist panics, knowing now for sure he is in mortal trouble. Eo Ja-seo tries to stay calm, knowing that to survive he will need to maintain his disguise and bluff even higher there. He shouts with authority, threatening the criminals for having dared to attack such a powerful clan's young mistress. The young man points a finger, claiming he will no longer tolerate any of the atrocities committed by that cowardly group. He completes the bluff by saying that not even their supreme leader will walk away unscathed if he continues with that provocation. The warriors in the audience are shocked to hear the young man openly defy the legendary red-robed demon. The henches get furious with the young man's audacity in insulting their master, so directly in the middle of the tavern. Suddenly, the wooden floor starts shaking, making the plates and cups rattle on the dining table there. Heavy and slow steps echo coming from the stairs, leaving everyone present in a state of absolute alert. Immediately, the three assassins kneel on the ground, demonstrating total submission to whoever is arriving. The protagonist and the guard watch that scene surprised, realizing the real threat just appeared. An elderly man with long white hair slowly walks down the stairs, radiating an extremely gloomy presence. Eo Ja-seo freezes upon recognizing the scarlet garments of the dreaded leader he just insulted in his big bluff. Panic takes hold of the young man upon realizing the legendary white-eyed villain is right before him now. Details of the elder's stern face reveal his frightening white eyes devoid of any kind of mercy. The witnesses in the tavern enter despair upon confirming the real identity of that legendary monster right there. The guard begs the girl to retreat, but she just smiles excitedly at finally seeing the great villain appear. The white-eyed demon positions himself imposing before the group, glaring at them with total coldness in the room. The environment becomes completely silent while the faction leader decides what his enemy's destiny will be. The henches explain they were cornered by the three warriors and apologize for the humiliation before the master. The master raises a trembling hand full of energy, containing the fury starting to grow inside him at that instant. He gestures slowly, concentrating his power while preparing a frightening display of his hidden strength. The old man crosses his arms, demanding absolute silence in the tavern before starting to speak with his foolish subordinates. He scolds his men, asking how they dared be defeated by three warriors he considers insignificant. Suddenly, he releases a colossal blast of internal energy that pushes everything around with a devastating force. Plates and bottles fly through the air, while those present try to resist that crushing spiritual pressure. The inn's floor cracks under the force of the elder's energy, showing his power is truly otherworldly. He focuses his sensory perception to count how many strong opponents with internal energy are present there. The old man keeps scanning the environment in search of the hidden presence of that master who blocked the attack earlier. To his surprise, only two people right there in front of him possess internal energy worthy of note. Eo Ja-seo realizes that the lack of internal energy in his body ended up confusing the enemy's sharp senses. He takes a step back slowly, considering taking advantage of this sensory confusion to run away from there and save his skin soon. The young man knows that if the master fails to locate him accurately, there will be a perfect chance to escape. With sweat trickling down his face, the protagonist prepares to run at the very first moment of general distraction. However, the villain concludes that one of them is purposefully and brilliantly hiding his strength and spiritual energy. He assumes there is a legendary and extremely skilled master hidden among the trio of opponents in the tavern. The impulsive girl confirms his suspicions, smiling victoriously upon seeing the villain fear the protagonist's power. She introduces Eo Ja-seo as the legendary sword sage capable of defeating any adversary with a single strike. The young man enters absolute panic on the inside, crying upon seeing that his master disguise was elevated to the extreme. The young woman draws her sword without hesitation, challenging the demonic leader to a mortal duel right there in the establishment. The two sides stare at each other, ready for the start of a confrontation that promises to destroy the entire tavern structure. She laughs out loud with pride, while the protagonist and the guard stay in their combat stances, quite tense. The girl pictures the legendary combat between the mysterious master and the great demon she wanted so much to witness. Her eyes shine with pure excitement at the idea of seeing a fight of epic proportions happen right in front of her. She provokes the old man, telling him and his henches to attack all at once without wasting more time with foolish talk. The subordinates draw their swords, furious with the insolence of that meddling young woman who won't stop provoking them. The guard enters total panic, begging the young mistress to stop causing even more trouble with the villains. Eo Ja-seo deeply laments his bad luck, thinking all he wanted was just to have a meal in peace. He makes a frustrated pout, resigned to the fact that he will have to fight for his life against legendary criminals. While night falls over the forest, a figure runs at high speed along the mountains-packed dirt road. A woman with black hair advances hurriedly, wondering where young Shan Hawk could have escaped to this time. In the middle of the dark forest under the full moon, the woman hears distant sounds of clashing metal coming from that direction. She speeds up her pace even more, jumping between trees, desperate to reach her younger sister in time. Meanwhile, in the tavern, the demonic leader starts releasing a sinister pink aura that frightens those present. Eo Ja-seo realizes he needs to stop that dangerous combat immediately before the old man draws his blade. The young man makes a risky decision and starts slowly sheathing his weapon back into the dark scabbard. He positions himself firmly in the middle of the hall, catching everyone's attention with his unexpected and calm gesture. The henches and the grand leader stop for an instant, staring at the young man without understanding the meaning of that daring attitude. The protagonist shouts his fake name with pride, trying to project the image of a legendary and formidable warrior. He declares out loud that he will sheath his sword, challenging the great master of evil, just with his master pose. The white-eyed demon knits his brows confused, trying to guess what plan is behind that insolent act. The old man concludes that the young man is that famous legendary warrior who decides his victories with a single precise strike. He assumes the young man reached the supreme level where he is capable of totally hiding his internal energy flow. Angered by what he considers boundless arrogance, the villain shouts, asking if he really wants to beat him like that. Upon seeing the old man's furious reaction, Eo Ja-seo enters total panic and extends his hand, begging him to wait a bit. He desperately tries to clear up the misunderstanding, noticing that the other warriors in the tavern are staring at him surprised. The young man explains that he put the sword away just because he is a weak fighter who is not worthy of facing such a strong opponent. He gestures toward the surrounding customers, trying to shift the focus from that tense situation in the destroyed inn. The protagonist claims that none of the ordinary warriors present their wish to start a combat against his group. The young man tries to argue that the grand leader would gain nothing by fighting people as weak and harmless as them. But the demonic master just grinds his teeth with more fury, interpreting that attitude as a terrible mockery. He accuses the protagonist of playing with words and trying to ridicule him with outrageous lies right there. The young man retreats, startled by the elder's furious reaction, while the girl in the background seems to find it all very amusing. The wind blows hard through the window cracks, breaking the tense silence that settled on that tavern floor. The old man irritably demands an honest explanation about that blatant lie of being just a low-level fighter. Upon noticing the villain decided to listen to his words, Eo Ja-seo tries to plot a peaceful way to convince him to retreat. At that instant, one of the warriors in the audience shouts that the young hero's words inspired him to leave his cowardice behind. The two companions who are paralyzed with fear draw their swords and reveal their names with determination. They explain they understood the protagonist's message and won't hide like cowards before danger anymore. The Guizhou warriors decide to abandon their previous titles and promise to fight to the end against the evil faction. While the girl celebrates with enthusiasm, Eo Ja-seo enters despair upon seeing the men only poured more fuel on the fire. To make matters worse, the other customers also stand up, drawing their swords, motivated by that heroic speech. A third warrior advances, declaring he will also join his forces to the red-haired hero's righteous cause. The white-eyed demon stares at the rebellion of those weak men, with a look loaded with contempt and deep fury. The protagonist freezes, knowing that all that sudden crowd courage will only accelerate everyone's death sentence. The personal guard tries to pull the young mistress back, desperate with the imminence of a violent massacre in the hall. The malignant clan subordinates watch the mutiny with gloomy expressions, waiting only for the master's order to act. The elder disdains that foolish union, calling the whole thing trash and demonstrating he fears none of those ordinary men. Eo Ja-seo knits his brows, surprised upon noticing strange movement happening right behind the feared enemy leader. He notices one of the rebel warriors is trying to sneak close to deliver a surprise attack from behind. The young man widens his eyes, knowing very well that an amateur trick of that level would never work against a legendary master. The rebel positions himself silently, raising his blade to strike the back of the old man, who stands motionless with his back turned. The protagonist gets confused upon seeing that the white-eyed demon doesn't seem to have detected the opponent's stealthy advance. Confident in his element of surprise, the man leaps, delivering a fast cut toward the demonic leader's neck. At a speed eyes can barely follow, the elder changes expression, demonstrating his divine reflexes. With a single devastating movement, the master draws his sword and cuts through the air, discharging a mortal strike on the attacker. The old man sheathes his weapon with extreme coldness and precision, as if that lethal defense hadn't required any effort from him. Blood gushes intensely from the warrior's chest as he falls defeated onto the inn's wooden floor in a few seconds. The impulsive girl screams in horror upon witnessing that man's brutal death right before her wide-open eyes. Eo Ja-seo reflects, shocked, on the fact that a true monster can sense the enemy's presence even without energy. The young woman staggers backward in total shock with the real violence of that combat she thought was just a fun game. Manhwa tries to stay standing, even trembling with fear after witnessing that brutal death right before her eyes. Taken by despair, she shouts that she will use her radiant flower sword to execute the dreaded enemy once and for all. However, the enemy leader delivers another fast and relentless attack, reaping the life of one more opponent in the place. While the warrior collapses lifeless, the old white-eyed demon stays calm in the middle of all that blood. The elder gets deeply annoyed and calls the young girl noisy for not knowing her proper place before him. Manhwa screams scared and tries to retreat, while the guard runs desperately to try to protect her from the monster. The guard draws his weapon, thinking it would have been much better if the young mistress had just passed out from fright. A warrior appears, sliding across the wooden floor while shouting to try to get the young mistress's attention. The old demon notices a new threat approaching and shifts his focus with a look of pure surprise and attention. An extremely fast and bright blade crosses the air, delivering a precise strike toward the dangerous elder. The powerful attack is blocked, generating a strong impact that pushes the two combatants apart in the middle of that inn. The brave warrior puts in maximum strength to endure the terrible pressure of the enemy strike that almost crushes him to the ground. The elder starts concentrating a devastating red energy in his free hand, ready to finish the combat right there. The energy explosion throws the defender far, making him fly out of control through the air after the violent impact. Manhwa watches that scene totally in shock, while the dangerous villain slowly turns in her direction again. Completely paralyzed by terror, the girl realizes she has no chance of escaping that terrible monster. The villain delivers a devastating horizontal cut, focused on ending the startled young woman's life once and for all. Unable to defend herself, the girl just closes her eyes and lets out a desperate scream, waiting for the blade's worst impact. A trail of dark blood crosses the air, indicating that the strike hit something brutally at that tense moment. A mysterious warrior dressed in white appears, descending from the sky as if floating under the full moon's light. With extreme agility, the warrior in white throws her shiny sword directly to protect the girl. The thrown weapon collides with millimeter precision against the elder's blade, deflecting the mortal attack in time. The enemy blade grazes millimeters from the young woman's face as she cries with relief and terror after escaping certain death. Thunderclap of pure energy happens in the place, releasing shockwaves that shake the inn's entire wooden deck. The old demon is pushed back by the impact force, but manages to steady himself quickly with extreme mastery. Meanwhile, the shiny sword spins swiftly through the air, returning magically to its wielder's hand. The warrior in white lands lightly and grips her blade with total firmness, showing an unbeatable posture. The warrior maintains her focused gaze while positioning herself to defend the allies from that terrible danger. She advances slowly across the wooden deck, demonstrating an intimidating presence that commands respect on the battlefield. With calm features and sharp eyes, she faces the enemy, showing she fears none of the old demon's tricks. The elder tries to identify who just arrived and notices he felt that same powerful presence in the past. The young woman introduces herself as Do Yan and proudly reveals she is one of the official disciples of the famous sect. The warriors in the background enter panic upon recognizing that the legendary wielder of the ice sword has finally arrived. The villain leader repeats the sect's name with disdain while analyzing the new opponent with a certain dose of distrust and fury. He lets out a sarcastic laugh and comments that this is just another sassy little girl who doesn't know her proper place. While the sect warrior burns with determination, young Eo Ja-seo watches the situation extremely surprised. The battlefield gets tense with the three fighters staring at each other on the deck under the heavy silence of the dark night. The villain mocks the girl's origin, claiming the characteristic smell of her academy is simply unbearable. He asks if she truly believes someone of her level has any chance of standing in the way of his plans. Do Yayan shouts, pointing her weapon and accusing the white-eyed demon of staining the world with the blood of his cruel crimes. Sonwar runs happily to hug the young man while he laments in thought how that girl is a magnet for disasters. The injured guard approaches Do-yan and places himself at her disposal to fight alongside her against the dangerous elder. The Eo Ja-seo analyzes that with the presence of 2 elite warriors, even sect elders would be well protected. Do-yan praises the brave protector for having done an excellent job, keeping young Sanhwa safe from all danger. The man humbly replies that if it weren't for you so high-up's quick help, the worst would have already happened to the mistress. Without warning, the young man delivers a fast strike to Sanhwa's neck, leaving the other 2 warriors totally surprised. The protector panics upon seeing his mistress fall, while the Ime disciple tries to understand the reason for that attitude. He reassures the allies, explaining that the emotional shock was too strong and that she just passed out to rest. The young man reflects seriously that considering the current circumstances, that was the best decision to make there. While holding the girl's body, he pragmatically suggests they focus on eliminating the major threat first. Do-yan fully agrees with the young man's decision while the guard still tries to process what he meant. The old demon lowers his head furiously upon noticing the warriors are talking, as if he weren't even there. He releases a devastating wave of red energy, shouting with hatred for being ignored in that manner. In response, the 2 allies leap rapidly in opposite directions to start a coordinated attack charge. The clan's brave guard advances with determination, delivering a precise cut with his sword to clear a path. The blades collide violently, generating a strong bluish shockwave that illuminates the inn's entire deck. Yayan takes advantage of the opening and executes an acrobatic movement in the air, spinning her sword with extreme elegance. The 2 start exchanging extremely fast strikes, while sparks fly with the continuous impact of their blades. The elder mocks the warrior, saying the legendary ice sword's attacks are as delicate as a child's. At that moment, the guard takes advantage of the distraction to attack by surprise from behind, aiming at the dangerous opponent's neck. With frightening reflexes, the white-eyed demon blocks the treacherous attack without needing to turn his gaze away from the warrior. The guard grinds his teeth, putting in maximum force, but realizes the elder's physical strength is completely absurd. The villain extends his free hand, loaded with dark energy, in the direction of the man's face to finish the combat. The monster's hand grabs the warrior's face with extreme force, while he desperately tries to resist the attack. Do-yan watches the scene with concern, knowing the ally is about to receive a fatal blow from the terrible elder. Guard uses his last strength to scream in despair that the young man abandoned the mistress in the middle of all that chaos. The elder releases a massive discharge of purple energy right in the guard's face, hurling him away with extreme violence. The Ime disciple watches horrified while the ally's body boils with the dark attack's destructive energy. The dreaded white-eyed demon rises back, imposing, focused only on finishing the job with the girl. She runs at high speed, passing by the villain to try to save what is left of her group in that critical situation. Do-yan shouts desperately, ordering the young man to grab the unconscious young mistress and run away from there as fast as possible. The protagonist gets startled upon hearing the warrior's sudden command while holding the fainted girl in his arms. He shouts back, telling her not to worry, because he is already taking the injured to a completely safe place. The young man promises he will return shortly to help in the combat, leaving the bandaged warrior totally speechless. The bandaged ally gets outraged and shouts, asking if the protagonist is really running away alone from the battle. The elder advances, swearing he will kill her and drag her corpse to be crushed by the destroyed inn's ruins. With no time to waste, the Ime disciple positions herself firmly, raising her weapon to contain his furious charge. She shouts that she will tear out the demon's filthy tongue, while he disdains the threat, considering it way too pathetic. The 2 blades clash again in the middle of the deck, generating an intense colorful light from the conflicting energies. With extreme boldness, the terrible villain uses his own strengthened hand to grab the warrior's sharp blade. With a brute movement, the elder smashes the legendary ice sword, making metal pieces fly through the air. Yayan retreats in complete shock upon seeing her precious sacred weapon destroyed so easily before her eyes. One of the sharp blade shards flies at high speed and embeds itself in the wooden column right beside the protagonist. The blue-robed spectators watch apprehensively, wondering if the legendary sword wielder was truly defeated. The young man realizes the danger only increases and decides he needs to get out of there with the girl as fast as possible without hesitating. The girl starts waking up slowly on the protagonist's shoulders, murmuring confusedly due to the state of shock. The bandaged ally starts yelling, calling the protagonist by the heroic title of Northern Star Sword. Upon hearing that annoying voice shout, the young man gets furious, knowing his silent escape plan was ruined for good. Out of patience, he delivers one more fast strike to the young woman's neck, making her pass out again on the spot. He curses the chatterbox companion in thought, complaining that idiot never learns to keep his mouth shut. The bandaged man keeps pointing and declaring out loud that the great savior capable of defeating the monster has arrived. The old white-eyed demon stops his attack immediately and turns with a hungry look in the hero's direction. Jang Chil smiles treacherously, asking if the young man was really planning to run away alone from there with the girl. The protagonist is forced to put the girl on the ground while the dreaded enemy leader walks slowly in his direction. The monster positions himself right in front of the young man, pointing his blade directly at the fallen girl as a real threat. Taken by anger, the young man promises he will send the bandaged companion straight to hell as soon as this fight ends. In response, the fellow just gives a mocking laugh, showing he doesn't care a bit about the hero's threats. The protagonist changes strategy and praises the companion out loud, saying everything went exactly as planned. He shouts with authority, telling the allied to release all the mortal poison against the enemies immediately at that instant. The bandaged warrior enters total panic, shouting desperately that he has no clue what poison he is talking about. The old demon attacks suddenly, delivering a violent claw strike in the direction of the bandaged man. With extreme ease, the elder grabs the liar's neck, interrupting any chance of defense or escape. While being choked, the fellow whispers desperately that he is just a simple, defenseless Tomb Raider. Feigning surprise, the protagonist shouts that the ally's sacrifice in poisoning his own body will never be forgotten. The elder is startled upon hearing that and glares at the Tomb Raider, believing the lie about the mortal poison. In panic, the villain throws the man far away to avoid any kind of contagion with a supposed toxic substance. Jang Chil collides violently against the wooden railing while the protagonist watches the fall without the slightest remorse. The liar slides down the deck, falling right next to young Sanhwa, who remains totally fainted on the floor. The young man keeps his guard raised, sweating cold, while plotting his next step to face the dangerous elder. The enemy leader wipes his hands and asks him when the young man will keep hiding his true fighting power. He shouts, saying the foolish tricks are over and that stalling won't spare the hero from facing that mortal combat. The white-eyed demon points his blade, severely ordering the protagonist to draw his own sword already. The elder analyzes the opponent, noting his bone structure is misaligned and his eyes look very strange. At that moment, the young man notices a crucial detail and deduces that the terrible villain is unable to track him using vision. With a confident smile on his face, the protagonist finally discovers the big secret behind his fighting style. Although fighting directly goes against his survival rules, he knows he has no other option than to step in. The young man positions himself firmly, believing that the opponent's vulnerability is his only real chance of victory. He faces the dangerous red-robed monster and swears out loud that he will be the one responsible for defeating him for good. Silence takes hold of the destroyed inn, with us preparing for the definitive clash that will decide everything. Yayan tries to pull herself together, even injured, while the dreaded elder waits for his adversary's movement with calm. The protagonist wields his weapon with total firmness, declaring that he will take responsibility for facing the demon. He looks back and kindly asks the Ime warrior to take all her injured disciples away from there soon. Do Yin warns him, saying the enemy is not ordinary and that the young man will be putting his own life in grave danger. He calmly replies that there has never been a single day in his existence that wasn't a big risky gamble. The young man reflects that living constantly on the limit of danger is the true meaning of being a low-level warrior. The Ime disciple is deeply impressed upon noticing he doesn't hesitate for a second to risk everything he has. She smiles, knowing her sense of honor would never allow her to just watch the young man fight alone there. Unexpectedly, the warrior runs into combat, leaving the protagonist totally surprised and without understanding anything. The young man is incredulous to see that his heroic speech ended up motivating the ally to commit such a tremendous folly. He focuses again on the white-eyed elder, confirming that the enemy's vision is indeed extremely impaired. With that in mind, the young man decides the best strategy will be to flank the adversary and deliver a strike from behind him. A warrior leaps from the shadows, thinking the only way for a weak fighter to beat a supreme master is to act like this. The elder remains motionless, seeming to predict the stealthy attack, aiming precisely at the openings of his defensive posture. With a fast and merciless movement, the old demon cuts the attacker in half without needing to try very hard at all. He shouts with anger, asking where the coward is who claimed he would fight him instead of those useless weaklings. The protagonist just watches the devastating attack in silence, maintaining absolute calm so as not to reveal his position. The young man notices the direct charge failed and decides to retreat to wait for a much better and safer opportunity. He smiles sideways, planning to use the secret tactic of creating a fake opening inside the enemy's own opening. Meanwhile, the brave Ime disciple bravely advances against one of the bald subordinates, guarding the place there. She delivers acrobatic cuts, but the opponent blocks the attacks with extreme ease using his own weapons. The bald henchman mocks the warrior's strength, claiming her strike circs are just style and possess no real power. Extremely annoyed, Do-yan replies that she is tired of hearing the sexist and offensive comments from that henchman. With a devastating lead strike, she kicks the bald man's chest, shouting that he isn't even worth the effort of a sword. The henchman staggers backward, feeling the powerful impact of the kick that almost makes him lose his balance on the wooden deck. The protagonist takes advantage of the perfect opening and appears silently right behind the distracted bald man, ready to act fast. The young man propels his body against the wooden floor, grabbing maximum speed to deliver a fatal surprise strike. The bald henchman notices the sudden approach and turns around quickly, raising his blade to contain the new intruder. He shouts with fury, declaring that he will force an opening by discharging a crushing strike against the protagonist. With divine reflexes, the young man ducks, gliding with agility underneath the opponent's sword and dodging the attack. He delivers a brutal upward cut, asking if the opponent really thinks he can handle the weight of his sword. The henchman blocks the protagonist's cut and mocks, saying his sword is way too light to be a real threat. However, the young man surprises the opponent by simply throwing his shiny weapon straight in the direction of his face. The sudden attack hits the bald man's cheek dead on, causing blood to gush intensely at that instant. Protagonist appears right in front of the shocked enemy and whispers coldly that all that previous story was a lie. The henchman spits blood and gets furious, accusing the young man of being a tremendous coward for throwing the weapon that way. The hero questions if he is really worried about cowardice in a life or death battle while telling him to shut up. With a fast movement, the young man immobilizes the bald man from behind, deciding to use him as a strategic human shield in the fight. The man tries to break free in despair, not understanding the evil plans the protagonist prepared for that situation. The young man tells the hostage to relax, coldly claiming he already stopped the bleeding on his neck so he won't die beforehand. Meanwhile, the old white-eyed demon keeps searching for his adversaries' whereabouts in the middle of the smoke. With the frightening look, the elder murmurs irritably, asking where that little cowardly rat decided to hide from him. He stomps with extreme force, breaking the wooden deck planks to release a huge amount of energy in the place. The monster shouts, telling the enemy to appear while the protagonist watches everything from afar, still holding his bald hostage. The two fighters are surrounded by wood splinters, flying violently due to the strong explosion caused by the elder. The young man moves with extreme agility into the shadows, trying to prevent his exact location from being discovered by the monster. However, the experienced villain manages to focus his attention and shouts, pointing to the exact direction where the young man is hiding. The elder discharges a massive burst of purple energy, destroying everything in his path toward the two targets. The devastating attack hits the bald man's body dead on, serving perfectly as a shield to protect the protagonist. Upon noticing the impact, the old demon changes expression upon noting that something very strange just happened in the combat. He flashes a macabre smile, commenting that the opponent is unable to hide his powerful presence completely in that fight. The elder widens his eyes in complete shock upon hearing the trembling voice of his own injured disciple right in front of him. Taking advantage of the distraction, the protagonist spins the blade embedded in the opponent's back to cause even greater damage. The villain leader spits a large amount of blood, feeling the extreme pain of the mortal wound he just suffered there. He murmurs with extreme fury while the protagonist maintains a cold expression, knowing his risky plan worked very well. The bald disciple screams desperately, warning his master that the whole thing was nothing more than a big mortal trap. The hero displays a sneering smile, ironically asking who was actually right from the very beginning of everything. With total coldness, he removes his sword from the enemy's body, causing more blood to gush over the wooden planks. The two opponents collapse without strength onto the deck floor, marking the definitive end of that terrible threat to the warriors. The spectators watch that absurd victory with looks of total astonishment, unable to believe what they witnessed. Yin stares at the protagonist, extremely confused and shocked by the tactical intelligence and relentless coldness demonstrated. The young man simply ignores the looks of admiration and turns away with indifference, as if that had been an ordinary job. Suddenly, the young man enters comical panic, shouting that he wants to leave from there immediately and will never return to the fortress. The Ime warrior widens her eyes and shouts desperately, warning the protagonist about an imminent danger right behind his back. A claw loaded with dark energy emerges rapidly from the shadows, delivering a surprise attack against his back. The strike hits the young man dead, generating a strong shockwave that pierces his body with an extremely violent dull sound. The hero lets out a groan of intense pain while his eyes widen with the brutal impact of that unexpected attack. He is hurled far through the air, totally losing control of his body while destruction takes over the deck. The young man screams in agony, feeling as if his chest were being completely frozen by a mysterious energy. The old demon reappears bloody, revealing he used his secret piercing palm technique to doom the young man. The elder swears the young man will suffer a fate worse than death, while the hero starts passing out, cursing his luck. He collides heavily against the wooden floor, deeply lamenting, having agreed to go to that cursed fortress. The young man reflects that an ordinary warrior should just focus on surviving in silence before losing consciousness for good. Suddenly, the protagonist opens his eyes startled, letting out a strong sigh upon waking up from his deep sleep. He faces an extremely clear and bright blue sky, revealing that the combat at the inn finally ended. Lying comfortably on a bed, the young man wonders if he passed out, but is immensely grateful for still being alive. He complains about the old demon in thought, saying the villain should have died without leaving that annoying wound on him. The young man presses his rib, feeling a terrible, sharp pain, and complains that any kind of demonic energy hurts way too much. Despite all the physical suffering, he flashes a side smile, relieved upon noticing his time to depart hasn't arrived yet. He sits up on the bed and proudly comments to the young woman that he must be much more resilient and strong than he imagined. The beautiful young woman gives a gentle laugh and praises him, calling him the supreme master who defeated the dreaded white-eyed demon. The protagonist gets totally surprised and embarrassed by the sudden praise received from the beautiful medic. Chong-A Hyen smiles, finding the young man's funny reactions and spontaneous ways very amusing in that situation. He then curiously asks where exactly he is and who that beautiful young woman before his resting bed might be. The young woman lets out a friendly laugh and points to herself, preparing to formally introduce herself to the patient. The medical office shows itself as a spacious place full of drawers of medicinal herbs organized on the walls. She maintains a welcoming and friendly countenance, passing total confidence to the young man who just woke up there. The hero praises the young woman's beauty again, insisting on knowing the identity of that gentle savior. She gets embarrassed by the direct praise, timidly commenting that she has never heard such a phrase in her entire life. She reveals herself to be Chong-A Hyen, the Grand Chief responsible for taking care of the entire medical pavilion in that huge fortress. Suddenly, Manhwa bursts into the room, crying a lot and desperately asking about the protagonist's health state. The girl enters panic, asking if the young man is going to die, while he stares at her with a quite comical expression. She cries, saying she heard the demon's technique possesses energy, so evil that it will make him suffer until death. The young woman turns around startled toward the medic, begging to know if that terrible information about the poison is real. Chong-A Hyen seriously explains that anyone hit by that strike has all their energy channels sealed. The young man enters despair upon realizing his own acupuncture points might be frozen from now on. The two women watch him with compassion while he tries to understand the gravity of his injured body's situation. He sits on the edge of the bed in absolute silence, processing the damage that terrible battle caused to his body. The protagonist tries to concentrate his energy, but feels a painful and paralyzing block all over his abdomen region. He screams in pain while forcing the energy flow, confirming that his meridians are indeed blocked at the moment. The medic notes the diagnosis in her notebook and coldly confirms that his vital points have already been totally closed. Manhwa bursts into tears, lamenting that the hero sacrificed all his internal power just to manage to protect her. The young woman movingly swears she will take care of him for the rest of her life, even if he becomes someone unable to use martial arts. The young man pushes the girl's face away with his hand, showing he is quite annoyed with that exaggerated early morning drama. The medic asks for calm, explaining the fortress lord is already searching for a legendary yang energy remedy to cure him. She makes a serious recommendation, expressly asking him not to try to use martial arts under any circumstances. The specialist warns that any effort will only serve to stimulate intense pain in his blocked vital points. Sitting outside the temple, the young man recalls the past when he tried hard to cultivate his own internal energy. He remembers meditating alone in frozen mountains, utilizing elders' breathing techniques. No matter how hard he tried, his body always rejected the accumulation of power, leaving him with just a minimal amount. He concludes that since he never wanted to be the greatest swordsman in the world, he has no real need to possess internal energy. The young man starts pondering the idea of asking for financial compensation instead of the expensive remedy when someone approaches. The medic approaches bringing a bowl of medicine and friendly comments that he looks in good shape to walk. The protagonist holds the bowl, staring at the dark liquid with a clear expression of distrust and disgust at the smell. He tries to change the subject, praising the famous Sichuan medical house, while she just encourages him to drink up. Without many alternatives, the young man tilts the bowl and swallows the bitter medicine all at once under his caretaker's watchful eye. He makes a terrible grimace, complaining the taste is so awful it looks more like a deadly poison than a real cure. The medic gives an ironic smile, noting something in her book, and humorously comments on his human endurance. The hero freezes in terror upon hearing the suspicious comment and wonders what exactly was inside that formula. She calmly explains that special sleeping pill only serves to ease extreme pains by stimulating the head. The young man widens his eyes upon realizing the stimulation happens right in the vital region close to the upper dantian of his head. A nurse rushes in shouting there is an emergency while the young man discreetly asks for more sleeping pills. The medic runs off, interested in the new case, while the protagonist takes advantage of the distraction to put his plan into practice. Alone in the room, he opens one of the wooden drawers and finds a container full of small, dark sleeping pills. He grabs one of the pills, thinking he needs to rest in his quarters before the physical pain starts bothering him again. Without hesitating, the young man puts the pill directly in his mouth, chewing it so the painkiller effect starts faster. At the exact same moment, he makes a hilarious face of agony due to the extremely bitter taste of that high-potency pill. Outside the Grand Fortress, the metallic noise of swords indicates a new conflict started forming in the courtyard. Local guards argue angrily, claiming the invaders shouldn't be using that training courtyard. A group of arrogant warriors mocks the protest, stating leaders like them don't need permission from subordinates. The invading group leader tells the low-level guards to get out of his way in extremely arrogant and hostile manner. The guards shout furiously, saying, "Master, you won't let them get away with that tremendous assault." While the men protest, the protagonist himself walks calmly through the courtyard, giving a long yawn. One of the aggressors mocks, saying the young man pretended not to see anything because the rumors about him losing his power are real. The gang of bullies starts laughing out loud, mocking that the young master now is nothing more than a simple, useless flunky like them. Their leader points a finger, maliciously claiming the young man will have to pay very dearly for messing with their youngest. At that moment, the protagonist stops, walking abruptly, and plants his feet firmly against the courtyard stones. Yu feels his chest throb with pain and notices his entire body is suffering quite a bit because of his internal wounds. Completely confused and annoyed by those men's audacity, the young man looks back with a quite serious expression. The bullies enter instant panic upon seeing that the feared swordsman turned around and prepares to face them head-on. The protagonist watches them in silence while wondering if he actually knows those idiots threatening him. Suddenly, he remembers one of their names and recognizes the group with an ironic smile shining on his pale face. Yu calls them the Seven Rats, making the gang leader furious and swearing to end his life right there. One of the henches interrupts the fight, pointing desperately to the approach of two extremely dangerous warriors. Two legendary high-level fighters walk calmly through the courtyard, catching everyone's attention present there. The henches tremble with fear while commenting on the immense influence and prestige the two warriors possess in the region. To everyone's surprise, the warriors stop before the young man and make a martial bow in a sign of deep respect for the young master. They bow before Yu, demonstrating total submission and loyalty to the young man who stays in silence watching everything. The blue-haired swordsman says he came to pay respects to the master and shows relief seeing him recovering well. Awkward with the situation, the young man tries to disguise the pain and stutters, saying he is fine while trying to send them away. The warrior asks if he is going to watch tomorrow's tournament and praises his courage if he decides to join the dispute. Laughing, the big guy reveals they were already eliminated early from that high-level competition. He tells that the dreaded Sichuan poison dragon is also on the way to participate in that legendary tournament. The young man widens his eyes and asks very excitedly if the fighter's sister, who is the region's most beautiful woman, will also come. Laughing at the master's reaction, the warrior confirms the gossip and says they are going to take a bath to get ready for her. The two say goodbye amicably and leave while the young man and the henches just watch them leave in silence. As soon as they move away, Yo feels an unbearable pang in his chest again and doubles over in half, agonizing with pain. The henches start suspecting the rumors about the young man losing his energy were false due to those men's respect. Suddenly, the group's older brother appears, slapping them on the head and cursing them as incompetent idiots. The man glares at the hero with a gloomy look and says that is the perfect opportunity to punish the young man once and for all. Meanwhile, the protagonist stays totally bent over, trying to contain the terrible internal burning of his channels. The leader points to the panting young man, claiming it is clear he cannot even muster the strength to defend himself. The villain draws his weapon, fiercely shouting that he will avenge the group's youngest, and orders the young man to draw his sword too. He summons his brothers for the attack, but one of them warns they are out of balance because the youngest isn't present. Yu lets out a painful yawn, murmuring that he is feeling a lot of pain and a terrible sleep that won't let him think straight. The young man realizes that if he doesn't release that terrible, accumulated energy inside his abdomen soon, the worst might happen. He enters total panic upon realizing that if he keeps holding back this power, his body will explode and he will end up dying.